Hey, everybody. So good to see you tonight. We're having yet another great late night conversation. Plenty to talk about, plenty to update you on. It's going to be good. So, yeah, let's jump right into it. We'll put on the opening music and we'll have another good show. Here we go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Plenty to talk about tonight. We're going to follow our usual format. First, the opening remarks, then the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. That's the way we do it. So if you got a question for the second half of the show, Rumble Rant, you can cash app me at CalebMoppin22, but the absolute best way to send questions is to send me, buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee. Great way to do it. You just buy me a coffee. And Raphael already did it, so he'll be the first one. Someone named Raphael sent a question in. I'm going to be answering that first off the bat. And, buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions. Now, momentum is building for the upcoming CPI event in New Jersey. Garland Nixon is going to be there. I'm getting media inquiries about it, and it's blowing up, and the musician and the speeches, and I mean, it's happening. So you don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss it. You can go ahead and register on Eventbrite. We're getting registrations now from all kinds of different places, and yeah, it's going to be something. You don't want to miss it. It is going to be quite a shindig, quite a gathering, quite a hootenanny, quite a I don't know. I'll think of archaic or humorous or witty terms for it, but it's going to be quite a gathering. So you don't want to miss it. So join us in New Jersey. Speeches, music, large food buffet for everybody, books, and it's going to be great. You don't want to miss it. We're going to be honoring some local activists for their years of service and their anti-imperialist work. It's going to be great. So see you in New Jersey. Now, if you got anything you would like us to talk about in the second half of the show, it's going to be opening remarks, then the roll call, then I answer your questions. Please send a Rumble rant or a rock or a Cash App, but the best way is to buy me a coffee. Please buy me a coffee for something to talk about in the second half of the show. Your questions are what make the second half of the show what it is. So please send your questions. So, folks, I am in a good place right now, I must say. I am looking at the news out of Russia today, and I am feeling good. So the Russian president and Trump's negotiating team met for 5 hours today, and it was very, very productive. It was a productive meeting. And Russia just signed a military alliance with India. And the icing on the cake, the absolute best thing is Zelensky has been ordered to step down as president of Ukraine. Now, who ordered him? Right? I thought Ukraine was an independent country. I thought that's what this whole war is about. Ukraine is just independent. Ukraine just does independent stuff. But apparently, it's not so independent as somebody told Zelensky, you better step down. You better step down. And it looks like the jig is up for pilfering millions of dollars in American taxpayer money to fight a war that his own people voted for him to prevent. Do you guys not remember that Zelensky was the peace candidate that that after the USA violently overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014, they had Poroshenko. But then Poroshenko was defeated and they was replaced by Zelensky. Zelensky was the peace candidate. He said he was going to repair things with the people in the eastern regions and the Donbass. He was going to implement the Minsk agreement. He didn't do it because he got into office and he found out he's not actually running the country. The country is run by NATO. It's run by the British intelligence in particular. That's what the Russians are always emphasizing, is they say it's the British that really run NATO, that run the war in Ukraine. It's not the White House, and it's not the French, and it's not the Germans. It's the British. And the British Empire has wanted to destroy Russia for centuries. They wanted to destroy Russia. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the word jingoism. Have you ever heard the word jingoism? Right? It's a phrase. It's a word in the American language. It means if you're too excited about war and militarism, or if you're too hateful of another country, you are jingoistic, or you're a jingoist. What does that come from? It comes from an English drinking song about fighting Russia that was popular in the 1800s. We don't want to fight, but by jingo if we do. We've got the ships, we've got the men, we've got the money too. We fought the bear before, and while we're Britain's true, the Russians shall not take Constantinople. Yeah, it was a drinking song called By Jingo, and it was a hate Russia drinking song that the English military guys sang in a bar. You know, we don't want to fight, but by jingo if we do. Anyway, I could sing it all night. I'm not going to do that. But that's actually where the term jingoism comes from. It's from a hate Russia song. The British have been hating the Russians for a really, really, really long time. And, and they are the driving force behind all of this. This war could have ended immediately. Within the first week, there was actually a peace deal and Boris Johnson killed it, right? And that was revealed. And now we're trying to see the war end, and the British Empire just won't let it end because they are afraid of losing control of the European mainland, right? The greatest fear of the British has always been that the Russians and the Germans get together. And that's why the first thing that happened when this war got going was the USA blew up the Nord Stream pipeline because Germany was about to start buying a whole bunch of natural gas from Russia. And if they bought it from Russia, then they weren't buying it from ExxonMobil and BP and Shell and Chevron and American natural gas companies. Russia is a competitor on the energy markets, and Wall Street and London, the Atlanticist global order, is about dominating oil and gas and dominating the energy markets, right? This world runs on oil and gas, and ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron. What does BP stand for? It stands for British Petroleum. Right? And British Petroleum is tied in with a giant bank. And what is that bank called? It's called HSBC Bank. And what does HSBC stand for? It stands for Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. And no, it is not a Chinese bank. It is a British bank set up by the British Empire to dominate China. Right? And in fact, it was a drug laundering bank. The Opium Wars. Do you remember the Opium Wars? Those were two wars the British waged to force the importation of opium onto China. And the bank that did the opium importing was called the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. And that's one of the biggest banks in the London Stock Exchange. And it's tied in with BP. And I mean, you go down the line, ExxonMobil, that's the Rockefellers, the Eastern establishment of New England, the richest family in the world, according to many sources, the Rockefeller oil dynasty of John D. Rockefeller, Standard Oil, all the way right up to today. You've got the Morgans, right? It's J.P. Morgan Chase. That's the Morgans, right? General Electric is their corporation, a huge military contractor tied in with ExxonMobil and Chase Bank. J.P. Morgan Chase, ExxonMobil, and General Electric, all centered around one gigantic financial institution that dominates the world. And yes, it is the British Empire economic system, which Wall Street is a very important part of. That British Empire economic system, that is very, very much what we are dealing with in this time. And that is who does not want peace with Russia. But it looks like Donald Trump, hey, He just wants to make money. Donald Trump wants to be remembered as a great president. Donald Trump is supported by fracking companies, and he's supported by Hobby Lobby and Betsy DeVos and a lot of wealthy American business owners, people from the South who just want to make money and are like, do we really need to go down with the British Empire system? I mean, do we really have to keep this war going? And it looks like they've had a productive meeting. It looks like the jig is up for Mr. Zelensky. And it looks like the American people, who overwhelmingly do not want American involvement in Ukraine, are going to get their way. And it looks like this war is, it seems like this war is actually going to end, right? It looks like this war is actually going to end, to finally end, right? Isn't this wild? We may actually see the end to this war. It's absolutely crazy. We may actually see the war come to an end after all this time, and that would be a great breakthrough. I mean, I can't tell you what this will mean, right? They're already talking about the Bering Sea tunnel, right? The Bering Sea bridge. Great things are happening right now. I am just overjoyed. I am just absolutely overjoyed. It was great to be able to meet Kirill Dmitriev when he came to, New York City to negotiate with the Trump administration. It was great to see that on Thanksgiving, they gave Kirill Dmitriev a big award from the American Chamber of Commerce. The American Chamber of Commerce all went to Russia, and they had a special Thanksgiving gala in Russia, which Thanksgiving is not a holiday in Russia, but they had a Thanksgiving gala in Moscow for Kirill Dmitriev, the Bering Sea Bridge guy. Things are going very, very, very well, and I am very, very happy about it. And I'm hoping that we will see this war end, and we will see a further connection of the American economy to the rising BRICS economy in the East, and we will see the American economy get further and further away from the British Empire and from the NATO countries and the Atlanticist pathology. And another sign that things are moving in a very, very, very good direction right now. Another sign is that John Bolton is pissed. John Bolton, the walrus, John Bolton, the spy who sold American classified information to NATO countries and is on trial for very serious crimes of espionage. Why, he's pissed. He can't stand it. No. And the fact that this guy's pissed, it's a good sign. Here's Johnny Bolton.
Now, you did write a piece for The Telegraph talking about Trump and your view selling out Ukraine, but the headline there says, but the tide may be turning. So perhaps pick up on that part of it if you can.
Well, I think by this point, enough Republicans in Congress have seen that there really isn't any hope that Trump is going to look out for American strategic interest here. He's looking for a Nobel Peace Prize. It's just as straightforward as that. He doesn't care what the substantive terms of the agreement are, so long as he can declare.
Yeah, that's what an awful thing, right? We have a president who just wants to make peace so bad. He's not thinking about how Wall Street can dominate the world. All he cares about is making peace. He wants to make peace and get a prize for making peace. And oh, gosh darn it, he should be thinking about how to make Wall Street and London dominate the world. Gosh darn it. And he wants to make peace so bad. I mean, my goodness. Trump's threatening war against Venezuela. Trump bombed Iran, but ain't warmongering enough for Mr. Bolton here. All Trump cares about is getting that prize. My goodness, that's like the best thing I've ever heard about Trump. I mean, if that's true, my goodness. I mean, I wish that were true. I wish that were the case, but that is great. Yeah, we got a president who all he cares about is making peace so they could give him an award for it. That's all he cares about. What a jerk, right? He's not helping us dominate the world and overthrow governments and carry out regime change. He just wants to be getting a prize for making peace. Get off my lawn.
For American strategic interest here. He's looking for a Nobel Peace Prize. It's just as straightforward as that. He doesn't care what the substantive terms of the agreement are, so long as he can declare success. And I think there's still...
Why is it taking so long if he doesn't care? I mean, it's looking to me like he cares about a few things, right? I wish that Donald Trump would just sign the damn agreement already. We need to end this war. But I mean, if Donald Trump is if all he cares about is just ending the war so he can get a peace prize, I mean, it's taken quite a long time.
Enough Republicans in Congress and plenty in the country who oppose the Russian aggression, who think it harms vital American national interest and peace and security in Europe.
That's right. We Americans, when we found out that on the other side of the planet, Russia and Ukraine were fighting, I mean, we just couldn't sleep at night. We were all hiding under our beds. Give me a break. American security interests. Seriously. Yeah, you do realize that Ukraine is right next to Russia, right? You do also realize that, the U.S. government violently overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014. And then Russia tried to negotiate a situation where the people in the eastern regions would have their rights respected. And that didn't happen. And then Ukraine bombed Donbass region for 8 years straight. And after those people declared independence, and yeah, and now, it's crazy. I made this point before. I will make this point again. The USA invaded Iraq. Iraq is on the other side of the planet. And what was the excuse for invading Iraq? The excuse was that Iraq was supposedly developing weapons of mass destruction. Well, we now find out that Iraq was not developing weapons of mass destruction, weren't developing chemical weapons, weren't developing atomic bombs or anything like that. That was all just made up. It was all bull honking. But they made it up to justify a war. But Iraq is on the other side of the planet. Meanwhile, Ukraine is right next to Russia. And Ukraine was indeed developing chemical and biological weapons and weapons of mass destruction. In fact, they were developing germs with which to ethnically exterminate Russia. They were like trying to figure out germs that would kill people of Russian heritage based on their DNA. And they had like concentration camp facilities where they were testing these germs on the mentally disabled. People that were in mental hospitals getting mental health treatment were forced to undergo experiments where they were injecting them with chemicals to see if they could develop a bioweapon that would kill Russians on an ethnic basis. You can't make this up, right? And I mean, if you don't believe me, Victoria Nuland talked about it on the floor of Congress. She was the U.S. Undersecretary for Ukraine. Let me see if I can pull up that clip for you. I mean, it's absolutely wild. So the USA invades Iraq that is on the other side of the planet, and that is unacceptable, obviously, but supposedly that's okay, because of weapons of mass destruction that weren't even there. But, we have a situation where Ukraine, which is right next to Russia, actively had biolabs and was trying to, develop bioweapons to kill Russians. And they're just supposed to do nothing about it. And when they respond to that, after the government's been violently overthrown, after they've been bombing Donbass for eight years, then that's just them being aggressive. I mean, you can't make this up. Yes, if you have any doubt about these biolabs existing, right? You say, Caleb, there's no biolabs. That's just Russian propaganda. Well, Victoria Nuland. I mean, this is Marco Rubio, not a big fan of Russia, and this is Victoria Nuland, definitely not a fan of Russia. They're on the floor of the U.S. Congress.
There's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine. Is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
I'm sorry. Wrong clip. I'm sorry. Hold on. You got to find the right clip, right? She gave long testimony about chemical weapons in Russia. I just want to show you the clip where she confirms that Ukraine has chemical weapons facilities. Hold on. Just got to find the right clip. Hold on. I just want you to see this because it's rather important. It's a rather important clip where she confirms the existence of the biolabs. It is very wild. I think this is the one. Hold on. Yeah, here we go. All right, this is the clip. Hold on. Right? Because it was a long session they did about bioweapons and biolabs from a few years back. But this is Marco Rubio, the warmongering, the guy who's behind the threats on Venezuela right now. This is Marco Rubio confirming confirming, that there are, indeed biolabs. Here we go. This is Victoria Nuland with Marco Rubio.
We would notice nothing. He's more than happy to agree to negotiations. He uses them to divide the opposition and demoralize them habitually, the way Putin has done as well. I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities.
Now, notice she didn't say no. She said, well, we don't call them weapons. We call them biological research facilities. And look at the naughty look on her face. So, people are wondering why Russia felt they had to intervene, right? And as if it wasn't enough, as if all the children in the Donbass who've been murdered by the Ukrainian government wasn't enough. We now have on the floor of the U.S. Congress, we have confirmation that they were, that they were developing biological weapons. Here we go.
Ukraine has.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
Yeah. Folks, Ukraine was developing chemical weapons to attack Russia with. And it was murdering Russian-speaking children in the eastern regions. But, we're led to believe that, no, this is just Russian aggression. It's a war of choice. Russia was just really mean. No, it's like there's a country on their border. They install a fanatically anti-Russian government. They murder people for 8 years straight for speaking the Russian language. They then, to top it all off, they're developing chemical weapons. Yeah, but just Russian aggression, right? Anyway, here's John the Walrus continuing with how angry he is that Trump might get a Nobel Peace Prize.
Going to look out for American strategic interest here. He's looking for a Nobel Peace Prize. It's just as straightforward as that. He doesn't care what the substantive terms of the agreement are, so long as he can declare success. And I think there are still enough Republicans in Congress and plenty in the country who oppose the Russian aggression, who think it harms vital American national interest and peace and security in Europe. And I hope, as has been emerging over the past 30 days, that more Republicans in Congress are prepared to disagree with the president in public. That's the hope I have.
What will that lead to?
Well, I think it will lead to demonstrations that in Congress, support for Ukraine, support for maintaining our connection with them in defense matters and intelligence matters, not giving in to these outrageous Russian demands, is very strong. And that at least we can continue to provide weapons and ammunition to European NATO members who can pass it on to Ukraine, continue the military intelligence. If Trump doesn't want to have anything more to do with Ukraine after agreeing to that, fine. I think that's just fine. Let him go try and win the Nobel Peace Prize somewhere else.
Okay.
All right. That's John Bolton. He's really angry. Looks like we're going to see a peace deal, folks. It looks like we are actually going to see a peace deal. Zelensky is getting ready to step down. They met for 5 hours today. Kirill Dmitriev got a big award from the American Chamber of Commerce. Good things are in the works, and I'm very, very happy about it. I am happy about it, but it ain't over till it's over. And that we have got to be in the streets. We have got to be in the streets, and we've got to be loud about it. This is not a spectator sport, folks. Politics is not a spectator sport. This is not simply a fun podcast to listen to. And CPI, we are ready to hit the streets. The moment that there is a deal, that is ready to go through, we are going to be in the streets. And I just want to show this video before I move on to the next part of this piece. I want to show a video just showing you we have been on top of this, right? No other organization in the United States has done the amount of supporting Russia that we have done. You know, I mean, we have been in the streets saying Russia is not our enemy. And we have been saying that since this conflict, you know, got escalated, since the special military operation was launched. We have been saying this loud and proud everywhere in the streets, over and over and over. We've been saying this. And I guess I just want to show you the video, you know, just kind of showing you all that we have done, the nonstop work for peace with Russia from the Center for Political Innovation. This special military operation was launched in 2022, and we have not stopped. And we have gone to Russia. We have held UN press conferences. We have been protesting in the streets. We have been having days of action, right? This organization, CPI, we are the main voice for peace with Russia. We have been out there representing the, you know, peace with Russia, peace with China position from the beginning. This is us. This is us.
Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy.
Russia is not our enemy.
The energy revenue to rebuild the industries of Russia, and he made Russia once again a strong economy. And that is why U.S. media demonizes Russia. That is why the U.S. government toppled the government of Ukraine in 2014 with the Euro-Maiden coup and installed a fanatically anti-Russian regime in Kiev. You know, I saw a CNN reporter claim that Ukraine was a peaceful country until now. Well, this is the monument in Donbass to all the children who have died of the shelling and the bombing being carried out by the US-backed regime in Kiev. 14,000 plus people dead, children who have died. It hasn't been a peaceful country. The people of Donbass have been subject to 8 years of bombing, 8 years of shelling, 8 years of a food blockade, and Russia is now moving in to protect them and bring an end to this. The Wall Street money sharks hate Russia. They hate China, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, and many other countries because they have governments that stand up to the international bankers and their monopolistic corporations.
And it's not a good situation. People are dying and it needs to end. And we need there to be a negotiation. We want there to be peace in Ukraine, and that means that our leaders sit down and negotiate. It doesn't mean that Boris Johnson gets on the phone and wrecks a peace deal just because he wants people to keep dying. Global food crisis spawned by a war. That's right. Russia is not our enemy. 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 Russia was with us in the fight against the Nazis in World War II. At the moments when America shows its true colors and is standing up for justice and truth, you'll notice that we're standing with Russia.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
It's time to stand for peace here at the United Nations. We are marching up to the religious rally. Russia and China are not our enemy.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia.
Youth festivals are very, very important to my organization in particular, the Center for Political Innovation. Every meeting that we have, we begin with the pledge. We've changed the word youth for people because we have people of all ages, but we begin, we raise our right hands, we pledge that we shall remember this unity forged at the end of the Second World War, not only today, not only this year, this week, but always, and the pledge goes on. But that is such a beautiful pledge that came out of the World Democratic Youth Federation. And I must say that the youth festivals represent the best, not just of this country, but of America. A time when we stood in solidarity with Russia to defeat fascism. And they're trying to erase that from American history.
I'm Caleb Maupin, the chair of the U.S. delegation, and he also represents the Center for Political Innovation.
Welcome, everybody. My name's Caleb Maupin. I'm the founder of the Center for Political Innovation. And in October, I was deeply honored when the youth office of the Russian Foreign Ministry reached out to me about forming a national preparatory committee for the upcoming World Youth Festival set for March in Russia. As someone who attended the World Festival of Youth and Students in 2013 in Quito, Ecuador, someone who attended the festival that was held in Sochi in 2017, as an advocate of socialism, peace, and international cooperation, as an American patriot, as a Christian, and someone who strives to live according to the teachings of Jesus Christ, I considered this to be a great opportunity. However, it is the circumstances of our upcoming trip that bring us here today. As we meet here today, Jesse Neville, Penny Hess, and Omali Yeshitela have been indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice. They are facing a possible 15 years in prison. Their trial date was just set for September. The Biden administration has charged them for doing what we are about to do, for going to an international conference in Russia. I'm the leader of the United States delegation. I'm representing the Center for Political Innovation. And I would like to just thank you from the bottom of my heart for that dynamic interview you gave to Tucker Carlson, in which you showed many, many young Americans a different kind of leadership, because our politicians and our leaders in the United States, they speak in sound bites, they speak in terms of scandal and gossip, but you presented a long-term vision, a scientific view of statecraft, and by getting through to young Americans, you made a difference. Many people who would never have listened to anything you had to say or heard another perspective heard you because of that interview. Now, getting to my question, things between our two countries are not good at this point. You know, before we left, we had to have a press conference at the United Nations. We are concerned about being prosecuted. There are 3 Americans that have already been charged and are facing prosecution, possibly 15 years in prison, simply because they attended a conference like this in Russia, the Uhuru movement they're called. And we are concerned because I know that I speak for the majority of the American people when I say that we do not want our tax money dumped into this conflict in Ukraine any longer. We do not want our country to continue to deteriorate internally while our leaders waste money on prolonging this war. I'm frightened by what the Biden administration is doing, not just in Ukraine, but also on Taiwan and on the Korean Peninsula. And I really do see gatherings like this as a potential road to peace. And what I have seen at this festival has blown my mind. The amount of young volunteers that you have here, people who have stepped up, who love their country and want to just come forward and put together dynamic events like this. What kind of role can events like this and young diplomacy activities like this play in helping set the stage for maybe changing the dangerous direction our leaders in the United States are taking things against the majority of the wishes of the majority of the people of our country? Thank you.
The United States of America is a huge and unique country in its own way. Over 300 years, in just 300 years, which is a small period of time compared to our history, but thanks to the talents of the Americans, it became a superpower, which is an obvious fact. We know outstanding American politicians, we know outstanding American business people, cultural activists, which is an obvious fact. We used to be allies during 2 world wars as we fought Nazism and fascism. What happened recently? After the war, after the alliance, the United States and the Soviet Union started dividing the world, and they did so successfully. And based on this balance of powers, they created international relations and created the modern system of international law. Then the Soviet Union ceased to exist for a number of reasons. I will not go into detail, but they were mainly internal reasons. There is one superpower remaining, represented by your country. The way your elites use this monopoly to global domination is dubious. In my opinion, the United States failed to bear this burden of responsibility that they happen to bear. They created monopoly, strengthened it. I don't mean the American people, I mean the ruling elites. While strengthening their monopoly, they soon faced a situation where the overwhelming majority of countries disliked it. And so, step by step, it became obvious to everyone that there is resistance to the forming global order.
All right, so we're here at Trump Tower.
They told you these people are horrible. They told you these people are terrible, that they will never do anything good for us. There's a reason for that. It's called money. It's called power. They want to weaken you mentally. They want to capture your spirit, stomp you out, and tell you, why bother? Why get out of bed in the morning? Why do anything worthwhile? No.
Great again. This was a great moment when Trump talked to Kim Jong-un and started the process of peace on the Korean Peninsula. And we want to see peace not just with North Korea, but with Russia, with China, with many countries around the world. It is outrageous that billions of dollars is being spent on prolonging the war in Ukraine when our people can't get relief in North Carolina. People are left behind in Georgia and North Carolina. They can't get the relief they need. This is outrageous. Our government is more concerned with waging wars around the world than for caring for our own people. That we need a president who will put America first, a president who will bring peace around the world. Only peace can make America.
Big crowd of people. Huge crowd of people here to support Donald Trump, pouring in to watch the inauguration ceremony in the Capital One Arena. Yeah, we set up here and over there. How you feeling? How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good. It was fun to pass out pamphlets at the hotel there. Everybody was asking for more.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We need to heal America as well. We need to pray for America. We need to make our country great again. We need to take over. The people need to take over to make our country better again. And I hope Trump can help us with that.
Donald Trump for one of the greatest moments of his first presidency, when he went to a country that America has technically been at war with since the 1950s and gave peace a chance. We want to make peace around the world.
We're here in front of the Spoon Bridge in Minneapolis to support peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. We have confronted our government multiple times.
We don't need this war. You know, we might not agree everything what Trump is doing, but we need peace. I don't want my child to be going in a war that's not ours. Our tax dollars not coming in our country. You know, the infrastructure is crappy. There's holes all over Chicago. You know, I'm sick of it.
A few people walking by, they look at the banner and they're trying to figure out if we're on the red team or the blue team, and they can't quite figure it out. Well, we're not on any team. We're on the team of the American working families. We're on the team of the American people. We're on the peace team. That's what team we're on.
Talks between Trump and Putin are the most important thing in the world right now. Way more important than anything these stupid rallies have been demanding. Hands off this, hands off that. We need hands off the thermonuclear button.
People have been very excited to hear something that isn't directly partisan, but rather demanding things that they need and want as people. It seems to me like people are very receptive of a message that is less oriented towards telling them which team to vote for.
Hands off the button. Hands off the button. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Hands off the button.
Yep, that's us. And it continued since then. You know, we were out in the streets to celebrate the Alaska summit. You saw the videos. We were out in the streets the day Kirill Dmitriev gathered. We had a day of action on October 4th. We have been go, raising loudly the peace tunnel, the peace bridge, the friendship bridge, connecting the USA to Russia via Alaska. And it looks like it's actually happening, right? And we have been doing it. We are the organization that you should be part of. If you want to have an America that is connected to the rising new economy in the East and backing away from the British Empire system, CPI is where you belong. We have been doing it, and I am looking at what's happening. Russia is not isolated. India just signed a military agreement with them. We've got a new government on the African continent, the Union of Sahel States that they're tied in with. They are friendly with China. They are friendly. North Korea has just made Russian a mandatory language in their schools, right? Showing how close Russia and North Korea are. There's whole chunks of the world that are getting along with Russia. Russia is not isolated. I saw that very, very clearly when I was at the World Youth Festival. Russia has deep ties and relations with many, many countries on the African continent, in South America, in Central America, in Asia, in Eastern Europe. You've got Fico in Slovakia. You've got so many different leaders, so many different places where Russia is their friend. Russia is a superpower, and there you go. And it's very, very exciting. Very, very exciting. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Now, I do want to mention that we are going to talk about a couple more things here tonight before we open it up for questions. I wanted to talk about two other topics that I wanted to get to. But before I do want to remind you that if you got any questions for the second half of the show, best way to send them in is to buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send in questions for the second half of the show. You can also do Rumble rants. You can also Cash App me at CalebMoppin22. All of them work, but buy me a coffee is the best. It is the best way to send your questions. Now, Jose Vega is our friend. He has spoken at CPI events before. He's a great anti-imperialist candidate in the Bronx. He just came out with a really great video today about his vision for how to improve things in the Bronx in New York City, part of his campaign. And it's an infrastructure project. Here's what he said.
I'm tired of the Cross Bronx Expressway. With over 200,000 vehicles crossing every single day, the Cross Bronx Expressway, people come from Connecticut to New Jersey into New York City, and something has to be done about it. Many of my opponents say stopping the expansion of the Cross Bronx Expressway is the solution, but quite frankly, that's not even close to enough. What I'm proposing is an alternative solution, a Cross Bronx train line. The Bronx does not have a single east to west train line. 30% of traffic could be reduced just by building a train line that goes from Bay Plaza in the Bronx all the way to Manhattan and underneath the George Washington Bridge. That could cause immediate alleviation in the Bronx. That way, anyone who wants to come in from New Jersey can leave their car parked in Fort Lee, New Jersey. People's lives will dramatically shift. Imagine being able to go to New Jersey on a single Metro card or now Omni card swipe. The people agree.
I'm Mike Cordero. I live over here in the community. They call me the mayor, everybody over here, so you're talking to the mayor.
Okay. We don't have any east to west trains.
Right.
We've only got Cross Bronx buses, but the BX35, the BX36, the BX12, or they're like people like sardines in there, right?
Yeah, exactly. I made a video not too long ago driving by the Cross Bronx, and I said, look at all these trucks, look at all this stuff, and there's the highest asthma rate in the country right here, and it's because of this.
it's time for the Bronx to have a cross-Bronx train. That would take you from Bay Plaza all the way to Manhattan.
Wow.
What do you think?
That'd be great.
Right? And not only that,
Great.
but it would extend into the George Washington Bridge so that there would be a stop in Fort Lee, New Jersey, so that people who drive in can leave their car.
Wow, that would be some great idea. That would be fantastic because you got a lot of commuters that don't want to pay the toll, so it'd be at their advantage doing that. That'd be great. That's great. Jose, you're on top of it, man. I appreciate your helping and getting this done because it'll benefit everybody in the city.
This is the beginning of my idea for a Bronx New Deal. A new deal for the Bronx, a new deal for New York City, and a new deal for the country.
Build the cross Bronx train.
Beautiful. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The man.
Thank you.
I mean, that's great. That's great. And, one thing that I have done in the past is if you want to talk about anti-imperialism is all about building. The imperialists want to impoverish us all, right? The imperialism is about keeping countries underdeveloped, keeping them impoverished. And the British Empire, they went to India, they burned the looms, forced the people of India to import their cloth from Britain. The British Empire, it went to, where did it go to? It went to different parts of the world and destroyed things, largely, inciting people against each other, destroying things. There's just so many examples. But if you look at the history of anti-imperialism, it's all about building, right? When Stalin came to power and was leading Russia to build itself up, they built the Dnieper Dam, which was the largest hydroelectrical facility in the world at that time. Today, the largest hydroelectrical facility in the world is in China. It's the Three Gorges Dam. It's the largest hydroelectrical power plant on Earth. And you can go down the line. Gaddafi, he built the world's largest irrigation system, the Great Man-Made River. China has built the world's largest and longest and highest highway, which is the China-Pakistan Friendship Highway. There's just so many great achievements that have been built by socialism. The Aswan Dam, the largest hydroelectrical facility in Egypt, was built by Abdul Nasser, the socialist leader of Egypt, and by Khrushchev and by the Soviet Union. They teamed up to electrify the Middle East and electrify Egypt. And there's just so many great construction projects. And that's when we talk about the Bering Sea Bridge. When we talk about the idea of connecting the United States to Russia over the Bering Sea, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about yet another great construction project. And, Putin did an amazing thing where he built the Kerch Bridge, which connects Crimea to Russia, to Kerch. And it was an amazing construction project. It is the largest bridge in all of Europe. And the Ukrainians hate this bridge. They just hate it. And they have droned it and they have bombed it and they've sent people to try and blow it up and they've done everything they can. They just hate this bridge. But this bridge that Putin built is indestructible. And I want to show you the video of the Kerch Bridge being constructed. I really would like you to see it. If I can find the video of them building it, of how it was built. I can just find that. I'd like you to see the construction of the Kerch Bridge. It is utterly amazing to watch how this largest bridge in Europe, the Kerch Bridge, was built. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. If I can find the construction video of the Kerch Bridge and just show you, I mean, what it was like to build this monumental infrastructure project that is kind of, a symbol of everything that Russia has achieved and all of that. I mean, since Crimea joined with Russia, they've gotten to be much more economically prosperous. The deal at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union was that, Ukraine got Crimea, but Russia could keep their military base there. And then after the USA violently overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014, it became questionable whether or not they would be able to have their military base there. And everybody living in Crimea, everybody living there is somehow tied in with the military base. And so the reason they all voted to keep the the bridge, the reason that they voted for it was because they wanted to hold on, just trying to find this video. Don't you hate that when like a video is there but then you can't find it? And everybody in Crimea, they wanted to join with Russia because it was economically prosperous, and they wanted to make sure that military base stayed there. Because if that military base was gone, then at that point they would be economically left behind, because that military base was all that was there. And so Crimea voted overwhelmingly to join with Russia. And I mean, no one doubts that that was a valid vote. I mean, it was overwhelming. And it's just because, it was a vote in Russia's favor, people say, oh, it couldn't have been a real election. But I mean, it's absurd how people, they dismiss reality, right? I mean, would you, if you were living there and your livelihood was connected to a Russian military base, would you want that Russian military base to go away? Obviously not. And so, I mean, it makes sense that the people in Crimea very much identify with Russia. They are connected to a Russian military base. They feel like they're in Russia. I mean, the idea that bridge and that Crimea was not Russian, I mean, it was just absurd. And this bridge that they built, the Kerch Bridge that connects Crimea to the Russia to Russia, is it's really a dynamic work. And if I could just find the video, I wanted to show you a video of the construction of this bridge. Let me see if I can just find you. Okay. I think I've got the video here. All right, I think I found it. But yeah, I mean, they obviously don't want you to see it, and that's one of the annoying things about YouTube, is that they've rigged the YouTube searches. When people talk about internet censorship, I mean, it used to be much easier to find things on YouTube, and then they messed up the search mechanism. And yeah, is this the video? Is this it? Yes. Okay, now we have found the construction video for the bridge. It took me this long. Don't you hate how they've messed up the search mechanism on YouTube? It is infuriating. It used to be you searched YouTube, you found what you were looking for. Now you search YouTube and you find 6 videos trying to tell you not to believe anything that's against the mainstream media. But anyhow, so yeah, we'll watch the Crimea construction bridge. We are all about infrastructure projects here. And we have plenty to say on that. But I do have one other topic I wanted to talk about tonight. So just waiting for the video to download, and we'll watch the amazing infrastructure project that is kind of the symbol of what Russia has achieved. I mean, a government that is able to mobilize the population to just build a gigantic, bridge like this, the largest bridge in Europe. I mean, this is optimism, this is hope, and this is the feeling I get when I go to Eurasia, etc. Here we go. Wow. Wow. I mean, that is just, wow. I mean, that is what I am for. I am for building, lifting people out of poverty with big construction projects, an economy that is rationally organized to just unleash human growth and creativity. That makes me want to put on, this is kind of added. I wasn't even going to do this, but I just thought of this. I actually want to put on, this is kind of a CPI original. Not exactly, right? It's not exactly a CPI original, but it's kind of a CPI original. So there's a very famous British folk singer called Ewan MacColl. And Ewan MacColl was a communist, and he wrote the Ballad of Ho Chi Minh, which is still quite popular. It's it's a song, and it's actually they sing it in Vietnam now, interestingly enough. But he wrote the Ballad of Ho Chi Minh. He wrote a lot of folk songs. He was just a popular folk singer in Britain who happened to be a communist. And he wrote the Ballad of Joe Stalin. And for a long time, you could not find an audio recording of the Ballad of Joe Stalin. Now it's available. For a long time, it wasn't there. You could only find the lyrics. So I sent the lyrics to my friend Paul, and Paul is going to be playing at the upcoming CPI event in New Jersey, right? Paul's a longtime friend of mine and a folk musician. And Paul said that the lyrics to the Ballad of Joe Stalin worked really, really well with Woody Guthrie's song, The Greatest Thing That Man Has Ever Done. And so he took the lyrics to the Ballad of Joe Stalin, and he put them to Woody Guthrie's The Greatest Thing That Man Has Ever Done, and he came up with kind of a CPI original, right? So it's the lyrics of Ewan MacColl about Stalin building great infrastructure projects all throughout the Soviet Union, and it's to the tune of Woody Guthrie's Greatest Thing That Man Has Ever Done. CPI original, The Ballad of Joe Stalin.
Joe Stalin was a mighty man was he. He led the Soviet people on the road to victory. All through the revolution he fought at Lenin's side. They made the combination till the day that Lenin died. He said, come all you people, we'll work with brain and hand. And then one day the Nazis came into the Soviet land. They plundered to the Volga to Stalingrad, and then Joe Stalin said, come on me boys, he kicked them out again. Joe Stalin was a southerner, in Georgia he was born, where the oranges grow thick and fast in fields of waving corn. And Joe, he was a farmer, his fingers they were green, and he planted out the biggest crop the world has ever seen. One day he looked upon his map and frowned and shook his head. There's too much brown, we need more green, these were the words he said. We'll have to change the weather, boys, he said, and then he smiled. So let's begin by planting trees along 3,000 miles. Joe Stalin rolled his sleeves up and he said, come on, let's start. The Volga River and the Don, they are too far apart. I think we'd better join them, so come on, help me, pal. We'll build a mighty waterway, the Volga-Don Canal. One day he looked into the north and saw the rivers three, all emptying their waters into the polar sea. No, that's not right, Joe Stalin said, those rivers, they are ours. We'll turn them round and make them work to give electric power. There was a range of mountains that was standing in the way, so Stalin put his hand out and he smoothed them all away. For Joe, he was determined to make the land all green, and that was the biggest project that the world had ever seen. Joe Stalin was a mighty man, he made a mighty plan. He harnessed nature to the plow to work for good of man. He's hammered out the future, the forgeman he has been, and made the worker state the best the world has ever seen. He has made the worker state the best the world has ever seen. Woo! Thank you.
Yeah, that's Paul. That's our folk musician. But I will play the original version for you because it's just a great song, because it just captures the essence of what was great about Stalin. Like, if you read, I recommend everybody, if you get a chance, read The Stalin Era by Anna Louise Strong. That's one of the most important books. I quote it extensively in the first chapter of Khrushchevism. I quote this book, The Stalin Era. Anna Louise Strong was one of my most favorite writers. She was an American journalist who was a communist, I guess. I mean, she was from a very religious family, and she got involved in the Red Cross and helping children, and she got interested in socialism, and she was very opposed to World War I, and she ended up moving to Russia. She was the editor of the Moscow News in English, and she wrote very powerful books about the Soviet Union and about what they accomplished during the Stalin years. And when Khrushchev's secret speech came out, she was just horrified by it. So she wrote her own book in response, which is called The Stalin Era. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book, not about Stalin the man, though she met Stalin on a number of occasions, but about Stalin's not about the personality of Stalin, but about what was achieved during those years and how the Soviet Union became a superpower, and what Stalin really meant in terms of transforming Russia into a superpower, defeating the Nazis and stuff. It's a really powerful book, and I would recommend it by Anna Louise Strong. Anna Louise Strong was a great American journalist, just a favorite of mine. Anything she wrote is good. She wrote My Native Land. She wrote I Change Worlds, the remaking of an American. She was just a brilliant, brilliant woman in so many ways. And she wrote this very, very powerful book about Stalin transforming Russia into being an industrial superpower and holding the country together in face of the Nazi invasion. And she saw it all up close. I mean, she saw the construction projects. She was there when they built the Dnieper Dam. She was there with the collectivization of agriculture. She watched it all happen. And she wrote this very, very compelling book called The Stalin Era, about what it was like to see a country that had been impoverished and non-industrialized, non-electrified, become a mighty powerhouse of industry, so strong it could withstand an invasion from the Nazis, and eventually invent space travel. She saw it happen. And it's stuff like that. That's the story that we've never been told. I find it absolutely infuriating that that's what socialism is supposed to be. It's about building the country up, raising the people up, and overcoming the irrationality of the market to just build and construct, right? 5-year economic plans, mobilizing the people to have a spirit of selflessness, to just build and construct. That's what socialism is all about. And that's not what it means to Americans. The Party for Socialism and Liberation, their platform in the last election, called for dismantling the U.S. power grid, right? Immediately getting rid of all fossil fuels, replacing them not with nuclear power, but with windmills and solar panels. They basically wanted to de-electrify the United States because I don't know why. And that has nothing to do with it. Socialism is about building, but leftism to American leftists is about tearing people down. It's about libidinal and Oedipal release. It's not the same as what Stalin was doing. And that's, CPI, the reason we're calling ourselves innovationists and we're no longer part of communism, I guess you could say, is because communism is very much rooted in the aesthetics and the psychology of the French Revolution. And that's a point I've been developing over the course of, the CPI project. We've been coming to understand why we need a new movement to get to the masses, why we urgently need a new movement. I do not know why it is taking so long to download the original version of The Ballad of Joe Stalin. It is taking a long time, and I've got even something else I wanted to talk about here tonight. So I hope that it'll download. I mean, it's almost done, but it's taking a really long time to get the original version of The Ballad of Joe Stalin to put on. We will put it on, though. We will put it on. We will put it on. All right, here it is. I don't know why it took so long, but the computers are weird things. All right, this is the original version of The Ballad of Joe Stalin. You heard our version of it where we did Woody Guthrie's The Greatest Thing the World Has Ever Seen, but this is the original version of The Ballad of Joe Stalin by Ewan McCool. It's a ballad about Stalin's great construction projects. So here we go.
Oh, Stalin was a mighty man, and a mighty man was he. He led the Soviet people on the road to victory. All through the revolution, he fought at Lenin's side, and they made a combination till the day that Lenin died. He said, come all you people, we must work with brain and hand. And then one day the Nazis came into the Soviet land. They plundered to the Volga, to Stalingrad, and then Joe Stalin said, come on, me boys, and kicked them out again. Oh, Stalin was a southerner, in Georgia he was born, where the oranges grow thick and fast and fields of waving corn. And Stalin is a farmer, his fingers they are green, and he has planted the biggest crop the world has ever seen. One day he looked upon the map and frowned and shook his head. There's too much brown and not enough green, these were the words he said. We'll have to change the weather, boys, he said, and then he smiled. So let's begin by planting trees along 3,000 miles. So Stalin rolled his sleeves up then and said it's time to start. The Volga River and the Don, they are too far apart. I think we'd better join them, so come and help me, pal, and we'll build a mighty waterway, the Volga-Don Canal. Then Stalin went into the north, and there saw rivers three, all emptying their waters into the polar sea. Now that's not right, Joe Stalin said, these rivers, they are ours. We'll turn them round and make them work and make electric power. There was a range of mountains that were standing in the way, so Stalin put his hand out and smoothed them all away. For Joe, he is determined to make the land all green, and that's the biggest project that the world has ever seen. Oh, Stalin is a mighty man, and he has a mighty plan. He's harnessed nature to the plow to work for the good of man. He's hammered out the future, the forgeman he has been, and he's made the worker state the best the world has ever seen.
Yeah, that is the communism I believe in. Not the permanent revolution of Trotsky, not anarcho woke kid, destruction, not degrowth pessimism. That is what I'm all about. Mobilizing to build and construct, breaking free from the dominance of the international monopolies and building and constructing. I have got to put on a couple songs for you all, right? Because this is what comes across if you listen to, like genuine revolutionary music, right? This is what comes across, right? I am going to put on a few revolutionary songs for you. One of these songs is a Bolshevik song, but it was popular during the Stalin years. It's called Our Locomotive. I love trains, right? People joke that all the CPI books have trains on the cover, and we have like big banners of trains, right? And that's because the train, in China, they're making high-speed trains that are like the future, they're going really fast. But this song uses trains as an analogy for socialist construction. It's called Nash Paravos. It's one of my favorite Bolshevik songs. And it's our locomotive. It's about a train. It's a song about a train, right? Nash Paravos, our locomotive. So this is, and it's got the lyrics translated on it, so you can understand the lyrics. Here we go. One of my all-time favorites. that was a great song. That is one of my favorite Bolshevik songs. It's using the train analogy. We are children of our ancestors, in our hands a rifle. You know, I absolutely love it, about building and constructing and all of that. Now, this is a song from China that is similar. It has similar themes in it. It's called We Walk Upon a Great Road. And we have used the analogy of the Great Road in CPI, right? Being an anti-imperialist, being in an organization, trying to intervene in history is walking upon the Great Road. And we've talked about that, right? And the anti-Khrushchevism campaign that we launched internally, we talked about walking on the Great Road and how it is difficult to walk upon the Great Road, et cetera. And that's where it came from, right? Is, we walk upon the Great Road. And so I'm going to put on this Chinese anthem called We Walk Upon the Great Road. I'm going to play that. And then after that, I'll talk about the other thing I wanted to talk about here tonight. But yes, I am all about building. And I think about that Bering Sea bridge and, how we were out in front of Trump's inauguration with a big banner that said, build the peace bridge, right? And I think about the fact that the peace bridge may actually be happening. Think about that. We were out in front of Trump's inauguration calling for something that could actually be happening at this moment. Do you realize there is such great possibility now? I'm worried about Venezuela. I did a whole stream last night about Venezuela and how I really hope the USA I'm just horrified. And there's a lot of bad things in the world right now. No question about it. Right? There's a lot of things to be upset about. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on. But this gives me a huge amount of hope, right? A huge, huge, huge amount of hope. And, the fact that we are involved in the historical process, that's what it means to be the Center for Political Innovation, is we are intervening. Right? We have decided that we're not just going to live biologically, but we are going to try and intervene in history. We see the world around us and we're going to try to make it better. We're going to try to intervene in the historical process to push the world in a better direction. This whole concept, we talk about living biologically, right? That a weed in your garden is technically alive, but it's only alive in the biological sense, right? A dog or a cat is alive, but they're only alive in the biological sense. But human beings have a way to spiritually awaken, to take the world around them and reinvent it and change it. And no other species is capable of doing what human beings are capable of doing, right? In just 5,000 years, we've gone from hunter-gatherers in the woods to space travel and iPhones. Look at beavers. They've been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. Look at ants. They've been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. But human beings have a godlike spark of creative power, this ability to take nature and reinvent it, to reinvent our relationship with nature and change the world. And that is beautiful, but it must be celebrated and cultivated. And we need a government that views human beings and their creativity as important and the hope of all the world. We don't need a government based on the Malthusian perception of human beings as useless eaters, as non-productive consumers. We need a government that invests actively in unleashing human creative power, a government of action that will fight for working families and cultivate human beings to be the great value creators and producers that we are capable of being, to enable us to keep reinventing our environment and harnessing nature in a more efficient way to propel to a higher mode. That is what we urgently need. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. And we urgently, urgently need that. Listen, before I put on the Great Road song, which is also taking a while to download, I do want to remind you that if you have any questions for the second half of the show, buy me a coffee, Cash App 22, Caleb Maupin, 22 on Cash App. But the best way is buy me a coffee, or you can also do Rumble Rants. But yeah, we do need questions for the second half of the show. It is appreciated. So yeah, but no, I'm excited. I put in orders for some new banners that we're going to have to decorate the hall in January. It's going to be great. And the plane tickets are purchased and the Airbnb for people from out of town. This event is coming together. It's really coming together. And I am pumped for our upcoming event, to say the least. Right. I am very, very pumped. So this is the Great Road song. We Walk on a Great Road, a song of the Chinese Revolution about how they made their country a superpower, and how China built itself up. We walk on the great road. So here we go. That's right. Walk on the Great Road with the Center for Political Innovation. We walk on a great road, and the momentum is unstoppable. All right. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about tonight, which kind of random, I guess, but not exactly random, but what the heck. Yesterday I went to go see a movie with my wife. We went and saw the new movie Hamnet. And I was going to film a review of it today, except it poured rain like crazy all day. It was raining cats and dogs, as they say here in New York City. It was a rainy day. So I couldn't go out and walk through the park and make my review of the movie Hamnet. And so you're going to have to wait. It'll be hopefully tomorrow or the next day. I'll finally make my review of the movie Hamnet, which honestly I didn't think was the best movie. But watching that movie about, a fictionalized account of the life of William Shakespeare and his wife, Anne Hathaway, watching that movie made me think a lot about William Shakespeare. And so tonight I thought I would talk a little bit about the work of William Shakespeare, what I take from it. Because actually Shakespeare is something that's somewhat important to me because of the fact that I had an uncle who was a theater professor. He was a theater professor at DePaul University in Chicago. And he lived in Evanston, and he died when I was 11 years old. And he was very much my hero. And I looked up to my uncle. Visiting my uncle in Chicago when I was a kid was the most thrilling experience, to go to a big city and meet my uncle, who was this theater professor. He was in a bunch of different movies. He was in A Bridge Too Far, and he was in many different movies. And, to see him and to be around his theater professor and theater friends of his and hear him talk about Shakespeare was very thrilling for me. So I like Shakespeare. And that's one thing, when I was a kid, my parents made a point, about once a year, a Shakespeare company would come to Wayne County, Ohio, where we lived. We would go see performances of Shakespeare, and we talked about it, right? Talked about it in the household. And so on that note, I wanted to comment on not on the life of Shakespeare and not on the new film that came out, but rather just on some of Shakespeare's works and why they are important. I actually do view Shakespeare's work as very, very deep and very, very profound and meaningful. And it's actually very relevant to a lot of the topics that we discuss right here on this channel. And so I'm going to talk about a couple different works of Shakespeare and what we can take from them, right? Shakespeare is considered the father of English literature. I mean, he is, he is the bard, right? The master of the English language, the founder of Western literature and dramaturgy. I mean, Shakespeare is a really, really important literary and dramatic figure. And let's just talk about him. So Shakespeare, he had three types of plays: tragedies, comedies, and histories. The tragedies were plays that were very dramatic and usually had not a happy ending, and were about betrayal and negative aspects of the human spirit. The comedies were lighthearted, had a happy ending, and tended to be about romance and romantic interactions. And the histories tended to be, depictions of monarchs, right? They would just be named after monarchs, and it would be, plays about British monarchs who existed. I will say that I relate overwhelmingly to Shakespeare's tragedies, right? The comedies don't really stand out for me. I will mention one of them that I have quite a bit to say about tonight. But for the most part, it's the tragedies of Shakespeare that speak to me. And the first one I want to talk about is Macbeth, right? Macbeth is Shakespeare's tragedy about a Scottish king who becomes a villain. And what Macbeth is famous for is that the tragedy of Macbeth it's the first literary anti-hero. Macbeth starts out at the beginning of the play, he's a good person. But gradually over the course of the play, he becomes a bad person. He becomes more and more power hungry, he becomes more and more ruthless, and eventually his own greed and his own lust for power and his own ruthlessness destroys him. And first it destroys his wife. His wife becomes mentally ill because of his greed and heartlessness. And then eventually, Macbeth himself is killed by his own destructive tendencies. I view the Macbeth tragedy about the Scottish king, Macbeth, King of Scotland, the tragedy of Macbeth. I view that as a play that's largely, I think, speaks a lot to the issue of addiction. It's not literally about substance addiction, but it's about it's about, how do I put this? It's about going against one's own principles and going against one's own beliefs, and not living true to yourself and giving in to temptation, and constantly moving the limits, right? And that's one thing that you see with a lot of addicts. There's a lot of people who become opioid addicts. They say, okay, well, I use opioids, but I'm never going to shoot up. I'm never going to be a junkie. And, give it a year after they become addicted to opioids, pretty soon they're shooting up. And it's like, that's one thing about alcoholism and about addiction, is that with addiction, you start out saying, well, I will never do blank. And then you do it. And then you say, okay, well, I'm doing this, but I'll never do blank. And then you do that. And then you say, okay, well, I'm doing this, but I'll never do blank. That's kind of what the play Macbeth is about. Macbeth starts out as a knight, a king, and he gradually does more and more. The other thing about Macbeth is that Macbeth, there are the weird sisters in the play Macbeth. They're witches, but they're not they don't have magical powers. They just have divination abilities. There's these witches who show up throughout the play that are able to predict the future. And, they basically, he goes to them frequently and they tell him what he is capable of, what's going to happen. And he doesn't believe them. And then gradually he fulfills his own prophecy. And then ultimately, at the very end, right? I mean, ultimately, what they tell him is that no man of woman born can ever kill Macbeth, is what they say. And so Turns out, right, he fights Macduff, and Macduff was born with cesarean section, so that's how he's able to kill him. He wasn't woman born, he was born with cesarean section. That's the irony of it. Macbeth is overconfident because he's been told by these witches that were right about everything all along. No man of woman born can ever kill Macbeth. Well, turns out there was somebody who was born via cesarean section, so he's shit out of luck, and he ends up dying in an epic fight scene, at the end of the play. It's quite an action-oriented play, right? And there's a lot of sword fighting and a lot of that. What I will say about the play Macbeth is that, it's his gradually becoming more and more ruthless, more and more power hungry, kind of the original anti-hero of literature, is that his wife becomes insane. And that is actually a really common theme in Shakespeare plays, right? In Hamlet, right, you have Ophelia who goes insane, and you have, a man being an asshole, basically, a man being a selfish asshole and being crazy, and it causes his spouse to lose her mind. And that's kind of interesting. And that kind of, you wonder about, like, later in the 1800s, you had the phenomenon of hysteria, and that whole thing that was a big part of Sigmund Freud and all of that. And it was like women were able to be crazy in ways that men were not able to, right? If men were crazy, they got thrown in a prison or a mental hospital or killed or something like that. But women could be crazy, in a way that men couldn't. And so I don't know, you have to wonder about that. That is kind of a theme in Shakespeare, right? Hamlet is tortured and losing his mind. And so then his girlfriend goes crazy and commits suicide, right? And, Macbeth, he becomes ruthless and power hungry, and then his wife starts having dreams of washing the blood off of her hands. And, Macbeth is a very Halloween-y, dark play, right? It very much is. And there's a lot of cultural cliches that come out of it, right? Many, many places we've heard double, double, toil and trouble, cauldron burn and cauldron bubble. That comes from Macbeth, right? Macbeth is an important work of literature. And you could argue it's kind of racist. I would argue it's against Scots, right? Because at the time that Shakespeare was living in, Scots and English people did not get along with each other very well, right? And that there was eventually, you had the Jacobite uprising that happened later, that was about a century later, but, they didn't get along. Macbeth is very much a stereotype of a greedy Scotsman, right? Scotsmen were portrayed as stingy, power hungry, without empathy, without emotions, cruel-hearted. You have the stereotype of the Scottish Highlanders, right? These mountain people, these wild men in the mountains who wore kilts, and and you can kind of see in the Macbeth play the stereotype of Scotsmen as not as kind-hearted, not as human as the English, right? That kind of comes across if you look at it. And that, adds, if you understand the context of the politics there, right? The fact that, Shakespeare was not going to do a play about an English king like that. He wasn't going to portray an English king as being a ruthless, heartless monster who drives his wife crazy. Now, he could do King Lear, right, which is about a weak king, right, about a king who's weak, my nation for a horse, whatnot. But he's not going to do a king. He's not going to do a play about an English king being ruthless in the same way. I thought that was interesting. Now, the other play that I wanted to talk about, and I've got a couple more I'm going to talk about, but Julius Caesar. The play Julius Caesar, I think, is very, very important because, a big part of CPI in our worldview is Michael Parenti's understanding of Julius Caesar as a populist, as a Bonapartist, as a Roman leader who positioned himself as a champion of the people and was trying to reform the Roman political system to benefit the poor, and as a result was stabbed to death by the wealthy senators, and that Rome did not have a sustainable economic model, and that Julius Caesar was trying to change the economic model of the Roman Empire to make it more sustainable. He basically wanted to make the Roman Empire multipolar, and he wanted to give citizenship to the peoples throughout the empire. And the wealthy Roman senators did not want to share power with Julius Caesar, and so they killed him. And in doing so, they ended the Roman Republic. and they paved the road for the fall of the Roman Empire, because Rome was not functioning in a sustainable way. And that, Julius Caesar's critique of the Roman world system, right, Pax Romana, the Roman world system, as it was set up, was not sustainable, because it was all centered around one city, and it was the Roman Empire. They controlled the trade routes. And he looked at it and he said, this is not sustainable. We're basically just extracting slaves and extracting wealth from all over the world into one mighty city. We're building up a mighty army to control trade routes. And in the long term, we're not going to be able to hold this together. And we need to start building up other cities within the Roman Empire and giving people in those cities skin in the game. And that, that's our geopolitical understanding, right? That the Roman Empire was an Atlanticist empire. The British Empire that came later, and now the globalist imperialist system, they were the same model as the Roman Empire, and it's not sustainable. An empire based on controlling trade routes to enrich the peoples of a mighty city by impoverishing and extracting from the planet, that's not a sustainable thing. You're not going to read that in Julius Caesar's play. But Michael Parenti's book touches on this, as does Karl Kautsky's important book, The Foundations of Christianity. And if you read then what's coming out in Russia about, geopolitics and Atlanticism and thalassocracy, you can understand why the Roman Empire and the fall of the Roman Empire is really, really important to what we're doing, in the Center for Political Innovation. We're developing a geopolitical understanding of imperialism and what can be done in America. America, a republic modeled on the Roman Empire in a lot of ways, that is part of the British Empire system. And so, it's a really important understanding that we've developed. Michael Parenti's very important book, The Assassination of Julius Caesar, is very, very critical of Shakespeare's play about the assassination of Julius Caesar, right? The death of Julius Caesar, the tragedy of Julius Caesar, by Shakespeare is it starts out kind of repeating the standard line. If you read standard Roman history, Julius Caesar is portrayed as a dictator, right? As this power-hungry general who was, giving stuff to the poor people in order to give himself more power, and he had to be killed because he was just so power-hungry. But then, the result of killing Julius Caesar was the civil war that ultimately led to the end of the Roman Republic and the monarchy, the empire. So after reading Julius Caesar's work, or after reading Michael Parenti's book on Julius Caesar, The Assassination of Julius Caesar, The People's History of Ancient Rome, I then went and revisited Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. And I found that actually, obviously Julius Caesar is not where, Julius Caesar in Shakespeare is not where Michael Parenti puts Julius Caesar, right? Julius Caesar is not exactly the good guy in the play. But if you really watch the play, the way the Shakespeare play, The Tragedy of Julius Caesar, is it starts out with Julius Caesar being this kind of distant figure who's the super popular, ever victorious general. And it starts out with all the Roman senators getting together and deciding they're going to kill him, and talking about how power hungry he is, they can't stand him, and conspiring to kill him. And the audience kind of assumes that's the right thing to do. Then, I believe it's the second act, you have the assassination, right? Julius Caesar goes to the Senate to give his speech. He gets stabbed to death. And then the rest of the play is the Roman senators going, oh shit, we shouldn't have done that, right? And you have the funeral of Julius Caesar, where Mark Antony gives his famous speech, "Friends, Roman countrymen, lend me your ear. We come to bury Caesar, not to praise him." And then you have the mobs of Romans that go around, killing people, and they're just so angry. And then you have the war between Augustus, Octavian, and Mark Antony, and they spend the whole play saying that basically Julius Caesar wasn't so bad. He wasn't so bad. He wasn't so bad. And that honestly killing him opened the floodgates of creating instability and tore the empire apart and created all these new problems. And however bad Julius Caesar was, ousting him didn't make things better. And that at the time Shakespeare wrote the tragedy of Julius Caesar, everyone understood this was a political message because there was widespread fear of what would happen when Queen Elizabeth died, right? The Queen Elizabeth didn't have a child, and she was the last of the Tudor monarchy. And there was a fear that there would be a civil war in England after the death of Queen Elizabeth, because who would replace her? She didn't have a direct heir, and so it would become a fight over who was the rightful one. And it was about basically, if you get rid of the strong leader at the top, as mad as you might be at the strong leader at the top, tearing them down leads to instability and chaos, and it makes things worse, right? And it was a political commentary, right? I always talk about how art reflects the time period it's written in, not the time period, that it depicts, right? Julius Caesar was not writing about ancient Rome. Julius Caesar was writing about England and about how, if you get rid of the king who holds the nation together, then there's instability and civil war, and there was a widespread fear in the country that England would deteriorate into a civil war. And that's what the play was really about. And it was about how they killed Julius Caesar and Rome deteriorated into a civil war. And in that play, right, there's the big line that everyone remembers is that at one point, they're discussing having killed Julius Caesar. And there's the line, "The fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves who are underlings." And they're saying that basically all the stuff they were blaming Julius Caesar for was actually done by them, right? They were just his followers. And, and the blind worship of Julius Caesar, they were the ones blindly worshiping him. And they were the ones fanatically carrying out his orders. And all the stuff they were mad at Julius Caesar for was actually stuff they did themselves. The fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves who are underlings, right? That is the point. They're realizing Julius Caesar, he may not have been perfect, but he held the empire together, and they got rid of him, and it led to total instability. And that speaks to Khrushchevism, right? That's actually important in Khrushchevism, right? That, tearing down Stalin after the death of Stalin did not make things better and ultimately led to the end of the Soviet Union. Was Stalin perfect? Obviously not. And there's no way that Stalin couldn't have hurt all kinds of people doing what he did. I mean, he decided who got to the front lines and who didn't. He decided who got to eat and who didn't when there were food shortages. Stalin hurt a lot of people, but he was the symbol of the Soviet Union industrializing, the symbol of the Soviet Union getting through World War II, the symbol of a generation that battled against all odds to make Russia a modern industrial country. And when Khrushchev got up after Stalin had died of natural causes and got up and ranted and raved about Stalin being the worst thing ever, that led to this huge demoralization among the population. I mean, it was the death of the superego. And that the play, The Tragedy of Julius Caesar, it's very much about the human relationship with power and authority. We all hate the government, but we all need a government, and we all love the government sometimes, right? And it's kind of like a child's relationship with its parents, right? We all love our parents and hate our parents, right? If the Oedipal feelings of teenage years are normal and healthy, you need to kind of hate your parents in order to go out on your own. But you also love your parents, right? And that we all have this weird love and hate relationship with power and authority, right? And that there's the Oedipal complex, right? The feeling of the teenage boy wants to kill his father, right? The father is threatened by the teenage boy's level of energy and his youthful testosterone as the old man is starting to deteriorate in his old age. And that's just a natural part of adulthood, of young adulthood for young men. But there's also the fact that, you have at the same time, you talk about the superego and transference, and that we all have the desire for, a father figure, right? The human mind has three parts, right? You have your ego, which is your thoughts, right? That's just your conscious mind, your thoughts. You have your id, which is your bodily desires, your energy level, exhaustion or high energy, your sex drive, your need to go to the bathroom, hunger, your bodily desires, that's your id. You have your ego, which is your conscious thoughts. But beyond that, you have what's called your super ego, or your conscience, your the voice in your head that is demanding that you be better, that is telling you to do the right thing, that is telling you to do your best, that is telling you to live up to higher standards. We all have a super ego. And the super ego is the source of guilt. If you ever feel guilt about doing the wrong thing, that's your super ego talking, right? You have this voice in your head that is often the voice of your parents, right? That you've kind of adopted as part of your psyche. This voice in your head that is urging you to do the right thing, urging you to be better, urging you to do the best. And that voice in your head will never be satisfied. And it drives you crazy because at the end of the day, you will never be good enough for your superego, right? Or else it wouldn't serve its purpose, right? I mean, your superego is always going to demand more of you. And that's the human experience, is that we all are frustrated with our superego because we want to do better. But at the same time, no matter how well we do, we will never be good enough for our superego, right? Our superego is always going to demand the impossible. It's going to demand even better because that's the purpose it serves. It's supposed to make you better. And that the assassination of Julius Caesar, Stalin's demonization of Khrushchev, that is killing the superego, right? That is an attempt to just say, you know what? I don't want to have a superego again. I want to kill my superego. And that is what Shakespeare is dealing with in the tragedy. He's dealing with the fact that the Roman senators got together. Julius Caesar had become the superego of the Roman Empire, and he scared them. He was demanding the impossible. He was taking reforms that they didn't like. So they got together and they killed him. And then what happened? Everything went to chaos because there was no North Star guiding them anymore. There was no one to look up to tell, there was no force of right and wrong. There was no central figure that they could be striving to please. It was like Julius Caesar, as much as they were annoyed with him, as much as they thought he was a tyrant, he was a linchpin that held the Roman Empire together. And they pulled the linchpin out and the whole deck of cards came crashing down. That's what the play is about. And that they created Caesar, that Caesar didn't try to play that role, but he ended up taking it on. And they wanted him to play that role. They needed someone to play the leadership role in the empire. They needed the great ever victorious general to lead the country. And they themselves made him the great leader that he was, and they worshiped him and they gave him the power. And it was them who created and made Julius Caesar what he was because they needed someone to play that role. And then they hated him for playing that role. And this is a really common thing. I mean, Richard Nixon is a great example of this. I don't think Richard Nixon was a great guy, but Richard Nixon is remembered in American history because he's the only American president who's ever resigned. He was facing impeachment proceedings and he resigned. And at the time that Richard Nixon resigned, it was all over the media that Richard Nixon was becoming a dictator. And I mean, it was true to some degree or other. He had an enemies list, right? He had sent the FBI to crush the Black Panthers. He was going after his political rivals. And so 1974, the U.S. media said, oh my God, Richard Nixon, he wants to be a king. He wants to be a dictator. And he was impeached. But why was Richard Nixon doing that? Because the U.S. ruling class had needed him to do that. Because in 1968, when he was elected president, there was a huge rebellion among the Black community, and the anti-Vietnam War was exploding everywhere. And at that point, the Cold War liberals weren't getting the job done. And we had Kennedy before that, Eisenhower, a very liberal Republican, then Kennedy, then Lyndon Johnson, and a big section of the ruling class said, you know what? We need an authoritarian, right-wing strongman to crush the Black Panthers and crush the students and go all in Vietnam. And if he can't go all in, then pull out. And so Richard Nixon came into office with the bulk of the American ruling class wanting him to be a dictator, wanting him to be an authoritarian strongman. And then he came in and he did what he was supposed to do. He told the FBI to take the gloves off and crush the Black Panthers. He escalated the Vietnam War very dramatically. And then when it became clear they weren't going to win, he pulled out of Vietnam and he lowered the voting age to 18. And he established, he went to China and he met with Mao. And he took all kinds of dramatic moves as a strong man. He created the Environmental Protection Agency, and Nixon did all kinds of stuff. He did his Nixon shocks, right? He took the USA off the gold standard. He created a wage and price freeze. He did all kinds of very, very dramatic moves that U.S. presidents don't generally do, right? Really, since Roosevelt, we never had a president who took so many dramatic moves, not all of which were good. I mean, escalating the Vietnam War and killing millions of Vietnamese people, not good. Crushing the Black Panthers ruthlessly, not good. He did a lot of bad things. But the point is, the U.S. ruling class wanted him to do those bad things. They picked him to do that. And then he did it. And by 1974, the Black Freedom Movement was in decline, and the anti-Vietnam War movement was in decline because the war was over. And all of a sudden, it was all over TV. Richard Nixon wants to be a dictator. Richard Nixon is an authoritarian strongman. Well, what they wanted, that's the job he signed up for. That's the job you gave him. And the very same American political establishment that created Richard Nixon to be the authoritarian strongman ousted him for being an authoritarian strongman. And that's kind of similar to the Julius Caesar thing, right? They created Caesar. The fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves, who are underlings, right? And the Julius Caesar play is really deep in terms of politics. It's very, very deep in terms of human psychology and in terms of politics. I actually would encourage you to go read Shakespeare's Julius Caesar and understand the context of he's fearing, and there was widespread fear in England at that time, that would happen after the death of Queen Elizabeth, that England would go the same way as the Roman Empire, and they would have another big, ugly war between the different dynasties, the different houses, etc. So that's Julius Caesar. I really do recommend. It's very important to what we talk about on here. Now, another play that I do want to comment on. This one's a comedy, and I want to comment on it. I don't even want to comment on the play, first of all. I want to comment on how it is perceived, right? Because there's a couple things about it. So the play is The Merchant of Venice, right? And The Merchant of Venice is one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, and it's anti-Semitic. I mean, and it is. I mean, look, it was written at the time it was written, in the context of the time it was written. It is an anti-Semitic play. But here's the thing, right? I have, first of all, in the Middle East, they don't speak English. They speak Arabic. Maybe they speak Persian. There's other languages, but they don't speak English. So they don't really read much Shakespeare. But there is one play they read, and that's Merchant of Venice, because, the fact that, Israel is the enemy and Israel is seen as the main threat. And they read The Merchant of Venice. However, I have seen the exact opposite of that, right? In the Middle East, the only Shakespeare play that is largely studied is The Merchant of Venice, because they see Israel as a threat. Opposition to Israel is kind of a big part of modern Middle East Arab Muslim culture, etc. But also, I can't believe this. I kid you not. But, when I was in school, we read Shakespeare plays, whatever. But I met Zionists in New York City who don't know anything else about Shakespeare, right? I think of Shakespeare, the great playwright who wrote Romeo and Juliet and wrote Hamlet and, wrote Midsummer Night's Dream and all that. But I have met Zionists. All they know about Shakespeare is once upon a time, there was this guy in England who wrote plays who hated Jews. And I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Right. And it's just like, and it's like, it is this worldview where everything just revolves around the Jews. All of human history is just a big conspiracy to get the Jews. That's Zionism. I have met Zionists. All they know about one of the greatest writers in human history, the greatest bards of the English language, Shakespeare, is, that guy hated Jews, didn't he? Didn't he hate Jews? And that just drives me crazy. And that is how sheltered their worldview is. Zionists are, it's like everything is either a conspiracy to get them or it's unbelievable. But yes, The Merchant of Venice is anti-Semitic. And it is, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people, they've tried to say it's not anti-Semitic, right? Because there is a passage. So The Merchant of Venice is a play. It's a comedy. And it's about, basically, there's, some business owner in Venice in Italy who really needs a loan really, really bad. And, only Jews can lend money. So they go and find this money lender named Shylock, who is ruthless and evil and is Jewish. And they ask Shylock for a loan, and he says, okay, I will loan it to you, but if you don't pay me back, instead of giving me money, I want a pound of your flesh. I want a pound of your flesh. I'm going to cut a pound of your flesh, right? It's very ruthless, right? He's going to kill him, basically, to get a pound of flesh if he doesn't pay it. And then the ships sink, and so the guy doesn't have the money. And so, oh no, what he's going to do now, Shylock's going to kill him. But they find some technicality in the law. And the technicality in the law is that you can't draw somebody else's blood. So they go to the court, and the court says, okay, Shylock, here's your knife. You can take the pound of flesh, but if he bleeds, you get the death penalty. And if you don't stab him, you also get the death penalty, because the contract says you have to fulfill your thing. And so Shylock is completely screwed. He can't stab the guy and get his pound of flesh without causing him to bleed. So Shylock is outwitted. And, it's supposed to be funny that, Shylock, the greedy money lender, ends up, I think he ends up getting killed or something like that, right? That's the Merchant of Venice, right? And it's that this greedy money lender, now Shylock is very clearly the villain, and he's ruthless and evil, but he has a soliloquy in the play where he says, has not a Jew eyes, if you touch him, if you cut a Jew, does he not bleed? And there's a soliloquy from Shylock about anti-Semitism, right? And so a lot of people say, well, see, that shows Shakespeare was condemning bigotry. Shakespeare was on the Jews' side. He was against what was being done to them. No, he's not. You read the play. No, he's not. Shylock is a ruthless, evil villain. There are countless lines throughout the play about how Jews are ruthless, evil villains. It's an anti-Semitic play. But here's the thing. That soliloquy about, has not a Jew eyes is actually very profound. You could say that Shakespeare did the first villain origin story, right? Now that's a big thing with Marvel movies. They have the villain, right? And you get the origin story of the villain, right? And Shylock is the villain, but the idea is that he's a villain, he's ruthless, he's evil because of all the persecution he's been subjected to. It's that whole thing about hurt people. And that's what Shakespeare is getting at, is that this villain is so bad because society doesn't view him as human, right? And that's the point of the soliloquies. He says, has not a Jew eyes? You want the whole thing. He's saying, basically, in Italy, in Italian society, we Jews are forced to live in a separate area with walls around it. We're viewed as evil. We're not viewed as people. We're not treated as human beings. So because of that, he's developed this ruthlessness, this cruelty, right? That's the point of the play, right? Is that Shylock is an evil villain, but it's, he hurt people, right? So it's kind of profound. And what's important about that is that at the time, you have to remember, all throughout medieval Europe, they had what were called passion plays, which were plays about the crucifixion of Jesus, in which Jews were portrayed as monstrous, evil people, right? Crucify him, bring us Barabbas, whatever. And that these passion plays that they would do, that were really common in the Middle Ages, they were not at all deep. They were really melodramatic. Jews were ruthless, evil, scary people who killed Jesus. And people would see these passion plays, and they would be so filled with anti-Semitic rage, they would go burn the Jewish neighborhood or whatever, right? It was awful. Well, Shakespeare was smarter than that. He wasn't going to write some dumb passion play. He did write an anti-Semitic play, but it was a deep anti-Semitic play. And he actually got into why the Jewish villain, Shylock, why the guy was such an asshole, why he was so cruel and indifferent. Well, it's because he's been subjected to a society that doesn't see him as a human being. And the Italian society isolates him, doesn't treat him as a human being. And he has this soliloquy about, I'm a human. Why can't I be a person? You guys don't see me as a human being, and that's why I've become this ruthless, evil villain. which is actually pretty profound if you look at it, right? Again, it is, if someone tries to tell you that because of the has not a Jew eyes part that it's not anti-Semitic, they're wrong. It is anti-Semitic, right? Shylock is a villain. Shylock is portrayed as ruthless and heartless and cruel. It's hilarious when he digs his own grave. You know, it's not, I mean, the play is very much an anti-Semitic play, but it's deeper in its anti-Semitism. It's deeper. The villain character is deep, and it's touching at the whole, you know, the whole thing about hurt people. And that's what I think is important about The Merchant of Venice. And you're never really gonna get that without, you know, kind of looking into it, right? You know, you get the layer of people that are just like, it's anti-Semitic. Yeah, it is. And then you get a layer of people that are like, well, no, it's not because of this soliloquy. Well, it's more complicated than that. And actually, the brilliance of it is that at the time, if you wrote a play about an evil Jew, it was supposed to be, you know, stupid, cartoonish, evil, scary Jew that does evil things. And, you know, that's what you were supposed to get. But Shakespeare didn't do that. Shakespeare said, I'm going to make my villain have layers. I'm going to get into why this guy is so evil, and I'm going to show this guy as being the result of a society that's cruel to him. That's actually very profound, I think. The next play I wanted to talk about is Othello. Now, Othello is it's a play, and it's about a Moorish prince, Othello. This guy from North Africa, a black man from North Africa, who is a prince in Italy, and he's married to a white woman, and he's very basically he has an advisor named Iago, and the advisor Iago tricks him into thinking that his wife is cheating on him, to the point that he murders his wife and then commits suicide. And what's interesting is that it's been widely pointed out, Othello is not really about race, right? That at the time that Shakespeare wrote it, there's very few racial references in it. However, because it is very clearly written in the script, he's Moorish, he's North African, and because of the fact that, you know, his wife is Italian and not North African, the play has been viewed throughout history from a racial lens. And that's very interesting. Paul Robeson, the great anti-imperialist, the great socialist, Marxist, you know, writer and civil rights leader, Paul Robeson played Othello on Broadway. And that because race is such a big issue in America, and race was such a big issue in Europe and in the 1800s, everyone has interpreted that play. You know, racists interpreted the play as being a sign that you shouldn't have interracial marriage. Anti-racists interpreted the play as a sign of the tragedy of all the pressure and hatred that people put on interracial couples. And if you actually read what Shakespeare wrote, it's really not about that. You know, it's not, right? You look at it, it's actually, you know, I mean, yeah, Othello is black, but, you know, Italy is not that far from North Africa. They're just across the Mediterranean. And it's actually, you look at it, Shakespeare probably did not intend for the play to be about race. But because of how history has developed since the time of Shakespeare, the play is endlessly read as being about race, which I find to be fascinating. You know, the other thing is that what I take from Othello, more than anything, is that the villain, Iago, is the advisor. Right? Othello is the king, and he's a good guy. He's Othello, he's a prince, he's a good leader, and he means well. The problem is that there is a very, very evil, self-serving manipulator whispering in his ear who knows how to push his buttons. That's the point, right? And that Othello is very insecure. Right. And that's why people take it to be racial. Right. The idea is this is a black man. He's married to a white woman. So he's insecure. Well, that's, again, Shakespeare, there's no sign that he saw it as a racial thing. Right. Many men are insecure. You know, hate to break it to you, but many men out there are insecure. Women can be insecure, too, no doubt. But, you know, Othello is insecure. Right. And he thinks his wife is cheating on him. But the point is, Iago, the advisor, figures out that that is Othello's weakness, and he uses that to get what he wants. That says so much. I wrote a whole book about Kamala Harris and the future of America that was all about how Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Donald Trump and all of them are surrounded by people who know how to push their buttons, right? And that, that's the point, right? Is that they seek out in modern politics, they seek out people that are very, very damaged and traumatized, and they surround them with Iagos, people who know how to push their buttons to get what they want. And you talk about, if you look at how the Libyan war happened, why is it that Barack Obama, the first black president, bombed and destroyed the most prosperous country on the African continent, Libya in North Africa? Why? It's because they knew how to push his buttons, right? They knew that Barack Obama was the child of a single mom, right? That he never knew his father, and that his mother then married a general in the Indonesian military, and that little Barack Obama was living in a foreign country, right? A black child with a white mother was living in Indonesia, and that his Indonesian stepdad beat his mother in front of him ruthlessly, and he couldn't do anything about it. And that it was damage that Barack Obama had, very similar to the damage that Bill Clinton had. Bill Clinton also never met his father. His mother married a man who was an alcoholic who beat her in front of Bill Clinton, right? And it's a very similar story. And that created a certain weakness, a feeling of powerlessness. When you see someone that you love as much as a child would love their mother being harmed, being harmed and not being able to do anything about it, they knew Barack Obama had this weakness. And so they convinced Barack Obama that if he didn't bomb Libya, there was going to be a genocide, right? They told him that Gaddafi had said when he retakes Benghazi, he's going to go house to house. And they told Obama that they were going to murder everyone in Benghazi. Now, Gaddafi wasn't going to do that. Gaddafi wasn't going to kill everyone in Benghazi. They were just going to find the terrorists. They were going to go house to house and search the houses to find the terrorists. But they worked on Barack Obama, and Samantha Power brags about this, and Ben Rhodes brags about this. Ben Rhodes, who was one of Obama's top advisors, wrote a memoir where he said that's what they did. They worked on Obama for 2 or 3 days, telling him they're going to go house to house when they retake Benghazi, and everyone's going to remember that you, Barack Obama, Gaddafi, evil Gaddafi, was going to kill this whole city, and you didn't do anything about it. And they knew Obama's weakness. And by knowing his weakness, his vulnerability, they were able to manipulate Barack Obama into bombing and destroying Libya. And Obama said when he left office that his greatest regret as president was going into Libya without a clear plan or anything. He knew that he'd been had. They got him. They manipulated him. That's like Iago, right? And that Iago, the guy whispering in the ear of the king, the lying manipulator who knows the emotional weakness of Othello. Othello is very insecure, and so knows that he's very afraid that his wife couldn't really love him, that his wife would cheat on him with somebody else, right? Iago manipulates that fear for his own ends. That is the story of power, right? And that is what they do, right? And there's a reason, all of this, right? The Order of Skull and Bones, which is the secret society at Yale that George W. Bush was a member of, George Bush Sr. was a member of, John Kerry was a member of, many U.S. presidents have been part of. What do you do when you join the Order of Skull and Bones? They sit down with you and you give them your sexual biography, and they write it down and they keep it hidden. Well, that's blackmail information, but it's not just blackmail. They have psychological information on you as well. They know your weaknesses, right? They know your vulnerabilities, your fears, any bad experiences you may have had. They sit down and they get your sexual biography. And the Order of Skull and Bones, apparently all these prominent Yale men who've been members of the Order of Skull and Bones at Yale, they have a vault somewhere with written down all of their sexual biographies. What is that about? It's about finding out their weaknesses, finding out how to push their buttons in order to manipulate them. All of this is very, very important in the world of intelligence, in the world of manipulating people, in the world of getting people to do what you want them to do, which is what the deep state and the intelligence apparatus is all about. How do we get people in positions of power whom we can manipulate? And that, what I have talked about when I wrote about the Kamala Harris book is that Kamala Harris, the people that we get to vote for are not the most important people usually. The most important people are the ones whispering in their ears. And if you start researching who Ben Rhodes is, if you start researching who Samantha Power is, if you start researching who Cass Sunstein is, you will start to see what is going on. It's those advisors. It's those strategists, right? Karl Rove, who was the advisor to Bush, right? They called Karl Rove Bush's brain. Karl Rove. Remember Karl Rove? Karl Rove was an interesting guy, right? Karl Rove, very, very interesting. So Karl Rove, his stepfather, right, who raised him, was gay. And during the campaign of 2004, right, Karl Rove ran that campaign, and they arranged for George W. Bush to win the 2004 election by putting gay marriage on the ballot in a number of states. And it was commented on in a couple different places that as that campaign that was going on, that was focused on basically whipping up opposition to homosexuality around the country, throughout that campaign, Karl Rove every weekend was flying to San Francisco to visit his stepfather, a gay man who was dying in the hospital from HIV. And people have pointed to that as an example of Karl Rove being ruthless, but it's actually a little bit deeper than that, right? So Bush's top advisor made the entire focus of the 2004 campaign opposition to homosexuality while he's visiting his gay stepfather in the hospital, and his gay stepfather is dying. And people say, well, that just shows that he's so ruthless. No, right? In a weird way, if you actually listen to Karl Rove viewed Christians as stupid. He viewed conservative Christians and evangelicals as stupid. He was an atheist. He's an atheist. And he views evangelical Christians as stupid. And he thought manipulating the anti-gay sentiments of Christians was like revenge. It was like he was using these stupid, idiotic Christian people. He was scaring them about gays in a cynical way for his own political gain to help Bush win the presidency. And it was almost like he was taunting them. And apparently this is something that Karl Rove throughout his entire career, it wasn't just the 2004 election, right? That his stepfather had been gay and he had this relationship with his gay stepfather, and that throughout the election, and even when Bush first ran for governor of Texas, he loved to stoke up anti-gay sentiments among Christians because he thought it was funny. He was like laughing at those stupid Christians and how much they hate gay people. And it was almost like a joke to him. It was like revenge. It was like, look at these stupid people. I'm going to manipulate them. I'm going to get them to vote for something they don't agree with because they don't like gays, right? You all hate gays, don't you? That doesn't make sense to a lot of us, right? We think, well, if the guy loved his gay stepfather, how could he run a presidential campaign that was focused on opposing homosexuality? But it actually fit perfectly. For him, it was like kind of this cynical revenge on those stupid working class Christians and all of that. And that's a big aspect of the rich and powerful. The bull on Wall Street. And the bull on Wall Street, right? A lot of people talk about it. It's a cliche among conspiracy people. They look at the Wall Street bull and they say, that is Baal, right? That is the Old Testament deity, the golden calf that Moses destroyed, the bull that they did the human sacrifices to, the satanic deity of the Old Testament. Well, here's the thing. It is and it isn't, right? Was it built in a way to probably with the Old Testament satanic deity that looks like a giant golden bull in mind? Yes. Is that because the Wall Street people literally worship an ancient demon called Baal? No. It's because if you look at, again, philosophical irrationalism, if you think about what the rich and powerful people are saying, if you read the writings of Leo Strauss, they think normal, ordinary people who believe in right and wrong are stupid suckers. And that the morality and the pretenses of ordinary people are stupid. And so they're putting an intentionally satanic image right on Wall Street to taunt and laugh at the stupid people who believe in right and wrong. And there's a lot of that. People look at like satanic imagery throughout American media. It's not that the elite are literally Satanists. The elite are without right and wrong. They are irrationalists. And they think that people believing in right and wrong and people wanting to do good and help other people is foolish. And that if you want to do right and wrong, you're a sucker. And if you want to help other people, you're stupid. In Washington, D.C., apparently, if you believe in right and wrong, they call you a Boy Scout. Oh, he's a Boy Scout, right? Oh, truth. They make fun of you if you actually believe in right and wrong. They're all about ruthlessness and political power. And so as a way to kind of mock the common people, right, there is a huge amount of doing things that are overtly satanic because it's like a joke, right? They're making fun of the stupid people who believe in right and wrong. And that was towards the end of the Bush presidency. There was some different stuff that came out, but like many of the neocon Republicans would go and spend their entire vacations at nude resorts, and their whole family, adults and kids, would go to these resorts and walk around naked all the time. And why would you do that? But it was revealed that they were doing that they were, they were going to nude resorts. And again, it was because this is something that ordinary people would be offended by. Ordinary people are offended by the idea of a nude resort. So we, as people that are manipulating those stupid suckers who believe in right and wrong and believe in Christianity and believe in helping other people and all of that, we're going to go to a resort and be naked all the time. And the conspiracy crowd, they make this kind of stuff into a horror movie, right? Our elite are getting together and sacrificing. No, they're not, right? They are and they aren't. The elite don't believe in right and wrong. The religion of the Western world is philosophical irrationalism. Philosophical irrationalism, the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, as passed down to Leo Strauss, as passed down to Ayn Rand. It is the belief that there is no truth, there is no morality, and that anyone who tries to construct a truth or a grand narrative to explain human history, or anyone who tries to tell you that right and wrong exists, is being totalitarian and trying to oppress you, and that great individuals create their own truth, and that great individuals also deconstruct and they take apart, they rip things apart, right? That's what great individuals do, is they engage in deconstruction, right? And that, Friedrich Nietzsche, he writes about the Übermensch. The Übermenschen is the person who no one can tell them what to do. They define their own moral and ethical code. They create their own reality with their willpower, defining what reality is. That's the great individual. That's philosophical irrationalism. And that philosophical irrationalists are terrified of populism. They view populism as the greatest fear. Populism is the rabble, the masses of people, the lowly ones who do believe in right and wrong and aren't smart and enlightened like them, coming together and forcing them to accept a philosophical code or a set of principles or a truth that they don't want to accept, right? Philosophical irrationalism is the ideology of the elite, the power-hungry, ruthless elite that think compassion is weakness, that kindness is for suckers, that want to be purely selfish and look down on the rest of humanity, that believes in kindness and compassion and right and wrong. That is what philosophical irrationalism is. And philosophical irrationalism, there's a tongue-in-cheek admiration for all things that are evil in philosophical irrationalism because they are in rebellion against any notion of order, right? Logos, right? That is the Greek word for order. And if you read, the gospel according to John, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. The actual translation is, in the beginning was the Logos, the order. In the beginning was order, and God is order. And philosophical irrationalists are in rebellion against order. They believe the universe is defined by chaos, and that that order is always an imposition, right? And that they are in rebellion against the Logos and against order. And so they are in rebellion, obviously, against any notion of God, because God would be a creator who brings order to the universe. But they're also opposed to any ideology, right? You know, it could be a secular ideology like communism. It could be but any attempt to create order in the universe, they view as totalitarian, and they view the universe as a sea of chaos through which they can swim and impose their own order and become mighty by tearing apart and ripping things apart. That is philosophical irrationalism. And, you know, the great text that I frequently reference is Lukács, the Marxist Lukács. He wrote his critique of philosophical irrationalism called The Destruction of Reason from a Marxist-Leninist perspective, arguing that the atrocities of the Nazis and the crimes of the Nazis and fascism was rooted in philosophical irrationalism, and that Nietzsche and his philosophy very much laid the foundations for what the Nazis did. The standard interpretation that's out there nowadays is, well, the Nazis distorted Nietzsche. The Nazis took Nietzsche out of context and made it a thing to serve their ends. But Lukács argues that actually the Nazis were the logical outcome of Nietzsche, right? And that ultimately Nietzsche is saying that you don't have to have compassion or empathy for anybody. You don't have to believe that right and wrong exists. You can do whatever you want. And it is man's ultimate rebellion against order, right? And that is basically what the elite of the West believe. They are in rebellion against order. They view Christianity and Judaism and Islam and communism as the same thing, as slave morality. That's the term that Nietzsche uses. He compares Christianity to communism. He says they're the exact same thing, right? That communism is nothing but Christianity. It's Christianity dressed up in new clothes, and that it's an attempt to create a morality system that will appeal to the weak, to glorify weakness, right? Whereas strong people reject morality. That's what Friedrich Nietzsche argued, and that is called philosophical irrationalism. And that is what the elite believe. And philosophical irrationalism is satanic, not in a magical spiritual sense. It's satanic in the sense that it is very much against any notion of an ethical system and focused on deconstruction of ethical systems, right? It is about destroying order, destroying logos. Well, I'm here to tell you that we as revolutionaries and anti-imperialists, what we are trying to do is create order and build. And I heard a beautiful, beautiful poem years ago. It was recited to me by an elderly communist. It goes like this. On a busy street in a busy town, I saw them tearing a building down. With a ho-heave-ho and a lusty yell, the men swung a beam and a sidewall fell. So I said to the foreman, are these men skilled, like those you would hire if you wanted to build? But the foreman just smiled and said, no, indeed. Unskilled labor is all that I need, for I can easily wreck in a week or two that which took builders years to do. So I thought to myself as I walked away, which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who builds with care, measuring life with a compass and square? Am I living my life by a well-made plan and striving to do the best that I can? Or am I that type that scours the town, content with the labor of tearing things down? And on that note, we will now do the roll call. Names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, who is with us tonight? Names and locations, who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Who is with us? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations, names and locations. We got Red Axis in Ottawa, Canada. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. We got Ryan in Kansas City. We got Rice from Adelaide, Australia. We got Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. We got John McCarthy in Chicago. We got Diana in Orlando, Florida. We got Auckland, New Zealand, Kiwi Corner. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? We got Jane in New Zealand. Good to see you, Jane. Good to see you. We got Penny in Minnesota. We got Penny again in Minnesota. You're in Minnesota twice, Penny. How did you do it? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Michael in New Jersey. Doing better today. Shout out to you, Michael. I'll be seeing you tomorrow. That's my plan for tomorrow afternoon. Gabby in Chicago. John in Florida. Good to see you, John. Good to see you, John in Florida. St. David's, Bermuda. Restless native. Good to see you. Jenny in Cincinnati. Good to see you, Jenny. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Chris in Salt Lake City. Great to see you, brother. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Anybody? Anybody? Jacob in Pensacola. That's very cool. Welcome, Jacob. Good to have you with us. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Phil in Brooklyn. Good to see you, Phil. Tijuana, Mexico. Mundo Cat. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Huey Long in the South. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Anybody else? Anybody else going once? Anybody else going twice? Well, folks, I'm glad to be here with you all tonight, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions. We have got 2 coffee questions to answer, one from Raphael and the other from John. If you guys have any questions, now would be the time to send them. Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send questions. The event is in Newark, near the Newark airport. Register for the event. But yes, Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send your questions. Masa from Kuwait. Good to see you. Not often we get someone from Kuwait on here, but there you are. Good to see you, folks. I do want to give you all another chance to ask questions. So, I was on a kick earlier tonight playing like the anthems of the constructive socialism that I like. I thought maybe I would put on the anthem of East Germany because I love it, right? It's one of my most favorite songs is the anthem of East Germany. And this video that accompanies it, that shows the youth leagues and all that, it's like out of the ruins of Nazism, out of the horrors of the Second World War. In East Germany, they built an anti-imperialist socialist government. And again, it was not that destructive socialism. It was optimistic socialism. And, the youth brigades they had were the Thalmann battalions, So the music of the East German national anthem, it's just so beautiful and optimistic, and the lyrics are amazing. The lyrics are like, so never again does a mother mourn her son in the death of war. It's really, really a beautiful, beautiful anthem. This is the anthem of East Germany, of the German Democratic Republic. It is really, really a beautiful piece. Look at the images here. That's the optimistic. It's not about destruction. It's not about tearing things down. It's that optimistic, constructive, pro-human, pro-growth spirit of socialism. This is the East German Democratic Republic national anthem. And send any questions if you got them.
Aufgestanden aus
Let us create and build as never before. Absolutely beautiful. That is an innovationist anthem, if ever, right? I would be in favor of taking the lyrics of that and translating them into English, and so we can sing them, doing an English version of the lyrics so we can sing them at CPI events. I absolutely love that anthem. Everything about it is just exactly what I'm about, right? The DDR anthem, it's called Rising from the Ruins. That's the name of the song, Risen from Ruins, right? The lyrics translate to from the ruins risen newly, to the future turned we stand. Let us serve your great will truly, Germany our fatherland. Triumph over bygone sorrow, can in unity be won. For we shall attain a morrow when over our Germany there is a shining sun. May both peace and joy inspire Germany, our fatherland. Peace is all the world's desire. To the peoples lend your hand. In fraternity united, we shall crush the people's foe. Let all paths by peace be lighted, that no mother shall again mourn her son in woe. Let us plow and build our nation, learn and work as never yet, that a free new generation, faith in its own strength begets. German youth for whom the striving of our people is at one. You are Germany's reviving, and over our Germany there is a shining sun. Yes, after the defeat of the Nazis, they wrote that beautiful, beautiful anthem for the German Democratic Republic. That is utterly amazing, utterly amazing. So anyway, all right. So any new questions that come in are appreciated, right? Buy me a coffee is the best way to send them. We got 2 coffee questions that have come in. Raphael in Glasgow said, what is your take on Darwinism, particularly its role as a cultural force in the West? By Darwinism, I mean the theory of a universal common descent and the emergence of a tree of life by means of natural selection, acting on a level of genetic mutation over billions of years. I always believed in this theory. I thought it was the only smart option. Recently, I have become reticent about the theory because it appears to have become deleterious consequences for our culture and is linked with reactionary ideology. Well, Raphael, I will just comment on the fact that, my identity as a person is very wrapped up in Darwinism because my father was a biologist and I grew up in a town that was very, very evangelical and conservative, where almost nobody didn't believe in 6-day creation. And so it was constantly throughout my childhood, pumped into my head that we are different because we believe in Darwin's theory of evolution, and we don't accept the Bible as being literally true. And that is what makes us different from the people in the town I grew up in. And so, that was just such a big part of my identity. And the other thing was that I got into many heated arguments with people in my little town about Darwin's evolution, and the arguments were very ignorant. People would say things like, well, one girl I went to school with said to me, why are there monkeys now? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, if people came from monkeys, why do the monkeys that exist now not turn into people? And I explained to her that, Darwinian evolution doesn't say that monkeys magically turn into people. It's the idea that over the course of generations, genetic mutation and all that, she didn't know that, right? And people just said very, very ignorant things that basically just amounted to, you should just believe in Genesis because that's what everybody knows. The Bible is literally true. And so a lot of the alienation I felt growing up was rooted in the fact that my family accepted Darwin's theory of evolution and that, the people I grew up around did not. And, I'm not a biologist and I know very little about the sciences. It's just not my field of interest and my field of knowledge. And I am not here. I am not going to try and debunk or argue against Darwinian evolution because I don't know enough to do that. And I don't feel a need. I don't believe in biblical literalism. I don't think the world is literally 6 days, was created in literally 6 days. So I don't feel a need to engage in any kind of biological debate. It seems to me that what Darwin was largely pointing to, that life changes over time, that species come from other species. I don't feel that's at all threatening. But many people have pointed out that Darwin discovered what he discovered, and he put into words what many people had kind of suspected, but he took with him a huge amount of British Empire ideology. For example, and I've heard biologists say, Darwin accepting biologists point out that Charles Darwin seemed to think that there was some that human beings were like the ultimate expression of biology, right? That it was all ultimately leading to human beings, the highest life form. And that's not scientific, right? You can believe that from a religious sense, that human beings are the most advanced life form and all of that. But if you just look at science, there's nothing in science that says that. There's nothing in science that says human beings are the ultimate culmination of all biological life, right? That all biological life up to now is leading toward human beings, the ultimate pinnacle. There's nothing in biology that says that. There's no evolution doesn't have a greater than or a less than in the biological sense. Darwinian biology does. Human beings are the greatest, right? And below human beings are mammals, and below mammals are reptiles, and below, and that there's this hierarchy of organisms. There is no such thing in biology. Biology doesn't say one species is better than another. It doesn't say that we're progressing and advancing or we're moving backwards. There's none of that, right? In the scientific world, there is no beginning or end. There is no right or wrong. There is no progressive or regressive, right? But in Darwin's interpretation, the way he presented his theory, there was, right? And I mean, that's that famous graphic that we've all seen of the monkey turning into the person, right? That's ultimately supposed to be like it's gradually getting higher and higher until we get Homo erectus. Well, I mean, that's not in there, right? It's just basically just over the course of time, life evolves and adapts, and genetic mutations happen, so Darwin was bringing with him a level of British Empire and modernist philosophy. There's no question about it. Darwin did believe in eugenics. Darwin was a Malthusian because that was the leading school of thought among rich people in the British Empire at the time. So of course he was a Malthusian, and of course he was a racist, and of course, Darwin was all of those things. And this is an important thing to remember about science, right? Is that science is supposed to be not biased, but anything that human beings do is going to have biases, right? That's just anything, no matter what, right? That we as human beings are stamped by our environment, and we take with ourselves the prejudices and the prevailing worldview of the time in which we live. That's what I said about, that's why I say that art reflects the time period it's created in, not the time period in which it depicts, right? That we take with us our environment and we place it onto everything. And that's just kind of how human beings are. And Darwin, being a biologist, in the time that he was there, in the context of the British society, when he developed his concept of life changing and adapting over time, it was stamped with the British Empire perspective. And there's no getting around that. And that doesn't mean that he didn't point to any truth in the process. It just means that there was a big stamp on his worldview because of that. And that's, I don't know what more there is to say about it other than that sense. Now, there are people in the CPI community that are 6-day creationists, and they're welcome, right? Gavin is my brother. Gavin is absolutely, he can give you DVDs and books, and he is adamant about that. There are people in the CPI community that are very much knowledgeable in the field of biology and are very adamant and, and I don't take part in scientific debates, But I will say that Darwinism was such a big part of my upbringing. It's taken me a while to see it with bigger eyes, right? I grew up in a small town where the belief was there was this kind of non-thinking, very ignorant opposition to Darwinian evolution that was based on shallowness. There was a family of kids who lived near me that were homeschooled. One of them actually, I remember he said to me, he said, "Caleb, did you know there's some people who don't think the Earth is only 6,000 years old? They think that species come from other species and all this." I'm thinking, like, yeah, there's a lot of people who think that, but they lived a very sheltered life, and that a lot of the people I grew up around, they made very, very sheltered and shallow arguments, and there was just this, you're going to hell and you're a bad person if you don't just accept 6-day creationism. And so based on that, and based on the fact that my family was different, that became such a big part of my identity. But I realized that there are things, I question a lot of things. First of all, right, in my household, Malthusianism was just accepted to be reality, right? I was told, my dad's an environmentalist, and it was just assumed overpopulation. It was just a fact. I had no idea. It never even occurred to me that anybody thought otherwise, that there was anything contrary to it. I assumed that overpopulation was a fact. I thought it was a fact. I had a science teacher in high school who bragged about how he would show people in class about how many people there are in the world and how big 6 billion was. And no one thought to argue with him or challenge him. Malthusianism was just a fact. I thought it was true. Well, it's not. And, and it wasn't until I was in college that I was in the Workers' World Party and I talked about overpopulation. And they said, "You can't say that. That's racist." And I said, "It's racist?" And they said, "Yeah, it's racist because, if you talk about overpopulation, that means you want to get rid of other races. You never want to get rid of your own race." And I thought, that's weird, but I just assumed overpopulation was true. And I'd heard Jane Goodall and other people say, well, the road to stopping overpopulation is the liberation of women. If women have access to birth control and control over their lives, they won't want to procreate. And I had no idea that there was opposition to Malthusianism. That I assumed Malthusianism was a fact. That's what I heard. That's what I heard at school. That's what I heard from my family members. That's what, and I knew about creationism, and I wasn't a creationist, right? But, I assumed if you weren't a creationist, you were a Malthusian, right? Because, overpopulation was just a fact. Well, when I got to college, I was in the Workers' World Party, and they said, "No, you're not allowed to say overpopulation in this group because it's racist." And I was just like, "Oh, okay." And I just followed the rules. No one ever explained to me that it was racist. And it wasn't until years later that I actually got my hands on a book by Karl Marx called Theories of Surplus Value. And I read Karl Marx's critique of Malthus. And it was through meeting the LaRoucheites, the followers of Lyndon LaRouche, who are like former Marxists. They presented me with the other side of the story, that Malthusianism, the idea that there's overpopulation, the idea of limited resources, that's bullshit. All right? It's just not true, because human beings are the source of all wealth. Human labor power and human creativity is what creates wealth. And Marx wrote this huge book that I've got up here on, where have I got it? I got it somewhere. Marx wrote this whole book, Theories of Surplus Value, explaining that there is no such thing as overpopulation, right? And that, there is no such thing as overpopulation, and Malthusianism is bullshit. And that, and then discovering Wallace Wattles, and Wallace Wattles is certainly an adherent of Darwinian evolution. He quotes Darwin in a lot in his work, right? He's a Christian socialist, but he very much adheres to evolution. So he's not but he critiques Malthusian thinking and argues that the nature of man is growth and all of that. And that the critique of Malthusianism is something that I is really important. It's actually pretty central in my belief now. I am anti-Malthusian, because degrowth is the basis of imperialism and the world is growing, etc. And I don't think, I unfortunately, for me and for a lot of people, Malthusianism and Darwinism walk hand in hand. They do, right? And it shouldn't, right? I mean, one should be able to accept, what Darwin discovered about biology and not be a Malthusian. However, they come as a package. And the same for environmentalism. One should be able to be concerned about the environment and want us to operate in a sustainable way with our environment and not be a Malthusian, right? In fact, originally, the biggest supporters of nuclear power were environmentalists because they saw that it was cleaner than fossil fuels. And it wasn't until big oil started bankrolling the environmental movement, the World Wildlife Federation, which is basically a product of the British royal family. It wasn't until, the Eastern establishment and the British, New England Eastern establishment took over, the Anglo-American establishment took over environmentalism, that environmentalists were anti-human, right? And in fact, being pro-human is a big part of being, you would think if you want healthy people, they would want a clean environment to live in. You don't have to be anti-human to be an environmentalist. And I don't think you have to be a Malthusian to be a Darwinist. However, they walk hand in hand because Darwin was a Malthusian. So I don't know. I question a lot of things, right? The British Empire, right? And this is a weird thing. A lot of people, I used to always roll my eyes. Why are the LaRouche people always talking about the British Empire? I get it now, right? The British Empire that came to dominate the world in the Victorian era, right? The British Empire of modernity, as capitalism moved into the monopolistic stage of imperialism, right? The Victorian British Empire had beliefs that are largely the foundation of a lot of evil things in our world. Primarily the belief that human beings are just animals. That is basically the primary foundational belief of the British Empire. Man is nothing but another animal, right? And that human beings are just biological creatures without a soul, and that you can control and manipulate human beings the same way you control and manipulate livestock. That is largely what the British Empire believes. And Darwinism, unfortunately, is interpreted in Malthusian and British Empire ways, but I don't think the two have to go together. Freudianism, again, Sigmund Freud was a genius. He was also a sociopath, I think. And I've read Sigmund Freud's writings and I've learned a lot from them. But Sigmund Freud wasn't a good dude. And he was kind of a cold sociopath. And that's kind of why he was able to make the observations he made. He interviewed hundreds of people, mainly college students and prisoners. He sat down with college students and prisoners and asked them about their lives. And because he was cold and distant and he didn't have the empathy that a normal human being has, he was able to make a lot of very cold-hearted observations. And he noticed certain patterns that just kept showing up, like the Oedipus complex, like the ego, the id. A lot of that stuff is brilliant. Freudian psychoanalysis is brilliant, but the guy who thought of it was not a good dude. And he also viewed human beings as animals, right? And he basically viewed human beings as animals. And Marx was brilliant in a lot of ways. Marx was definitely not a Malthusian. But the weakness of Marx's work, I would argue, I have a video I made like 7 years ago. What was Marx wrong about? One of the weaknesses of his work is this concept of historical inevitability. Why should Marx exist, right? If it's all just going to happen, historical inevitability, right? We all just act in our own economic interest. Why heroes? Why sacrifice? Everyone just it's all just going to kind of happen. There's really no point, right? Well, clearly there is a point. Clearly human beings have a spiritual existence. Clearly there's more to being human than just acting in one's economic interest. So, the economic determinism, which is, that's largely a critique of Marxism made by Gramsci and others, right? That is a weakness in the Marxist worldview, what they call economic determinism. But it also what does it flow from? It flows from viewing human beings as just another animal, right? It's just, biological. But then if you read Frederick Engels' essay on the role of labor and the transition from ape to man, he very clearly says human beings are not just another animal. They force the environment to serve them. They are creative. They master it. Labor, the labor power, the power of labor that defines human beings is unlike any other species, and that is uniquely human. That's what Frederick Engels is saying. So anyway, I hope that gives you an answer, Raphael. I don't see a reason to. I'm definitely not a 6-day creationist. I'm definitely not that, and I don't feel a need to go after Darwin's biology. But I know what you're saying in the sense that that it's taken me a long time to realize how much Malthusianism is a problem and how much the British Empire worldview is a problem, and how much even Marxism is influenced by these ideas. Marx was very critical of Malthus, but Marx also had this belief that human beings are just another animal, and human beings are not just another animal, right? Human beings are something very, very special. Now, John McCarthy says they're probably going to need that train Jose is talking about to accommodate all the extra people coming to New Jersey for our meeting on January 11th. Well, great. Excellent. Yeah, I hope you all come. It's going to be great. It's going to be a really, really great event. I hope you go ahead and register. We're honoring someone from the Uhuru movement. We're honoring, a couple great local people that I know. And we're going to have music, and I mean, it's gaining momentum. Garland Nixon is now confirmed. He's going to be there. This is really turning into something. So I hope you're there. I hope to see you there. It's going to be great. I hope you register, etc. So, all right. Now, Penny sent a video. It's called RoboCops in China. So I will put this on RoboCops in China. If anyone has any more questions, the best way to do it is buy me a coffee. You can also Cash App me, Caleb Moppa 22, or you can send a Rumble rant. But the best way to send questions, the absolute best way to send questions, is to buy me a coffee. And I will put on Penny's video of RoboCops in China. RoboCops in China. But yeah, send any more questions that you got. If not, we'll probably be wrapping this up pretty soon. But that's okay. We've been going we're almost at the 3-hour mark. So it's not like we've had a short stream tonight. I do these streams. I feel it's always better to stream than not stream. Sometimes you can't stream, and sometimes there are situations where it's better to just, be private or whatever. But tonight I felt like, hey, what the heck, today was a rainy day. I wasn't able to record the video I wanted to record, but I got a lot done today. I will say there were a lot of little tasks I wake up every day. I make a list of what I need to do today. I make lists. And I go through the day scratching things off the list. I scratched quite a few things off the list today. I'm proud of myself for doing that. Printed some paperwork and signed some paperwork I needed to sign, and made some orders I needed to order, and, got some good stuff done. All right, here's Penny's video.
我刚出去半米不到吧，他就直接提示我，而且反馈很快。
看他你就下意识的就这样停在停止线这里了。我觉得他这个还是很有作用的，节省一定的警力成本吧。我觉得在未来也是一个趋势嘛。
他现在是路中央指挥和路口劝导这2种模式。
Well, there you go. I don't know what to say about that. Part of me thinks, okay, that's good. I mean, it's certainly technologically impressive. I got questions about that one, Penny. You generally send very, very good videos, and I mean that's okay, but I just, I have mixed feelings seeing that. Part of me is a little bit, I'm not sure I want RoboCops, but hey, what the heck. All right, folks. Well, listen, it's been a fun one tonight. We're close to the 3-hour mark, so I'm probably gonna close down this stream. It's been fun. I hope you all enjoyed it. I need to cut some segments. But join the Center for Political Innovation. We're always needing new members. Get involved in our community. And dare to struggle, dare to win. We're doing great, great stuff. I'm going to put on the closing music. Thanks, everybody. It's been fun. It's been fun. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.